When a billionaire CEO locks eyes with a struggling single father across a boardroom table at 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, nobody expects what happens next. But what Victoria Hale saw in Ethan Cole's exhausted face would change both their lives forever. And it started with the one thing he couldn't hide anymore: desperation. This is their story. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey travels. The coffee had gone cold 2 hours ago. Ethan Cole stared at the styrofoam cup sitting next to his keyboard, a ring of brown residue clinging to the inside like it was the only thing holding itself together. He understood the feeling. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, his shoulders ached from tension he couldn't shake, and somewhere in the back of his mind, a clock was ticking, counting down to the next disaster he wouldn't see coming. 32 years old. That's all he was. 32. And he felt like he'd lived 3 lifetimes in the past 5 years alone. The office around him hummed with the kind of productivity that made successful companies thrive. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the occasional burst of laughter from the marketing department down the hall. Hale Industries was a machine, and everyone in it was a carefully calibrated part. Everyone except Ethan, who felt more like a bolt that had been stripped of its threads, spinning uselessly while everything else moved forward without him. He glanced at the clock on his computer screen. 9:47 a.m., 47 minutes late. Again. The guilt sat heavy in his chest, mixing with the exhaustion and the fear and the ever-present anxiety that he was failing at everything that mattered. He'd called ahead this time, left a voicemail for his supervisor before 6 a.m., explaining about the flat tire, about sitting on the side of Highway 101 in the dark, with a jack that wouldn't quite fit right and a spare that looked older than Ava. But voicemails didn't change the optics. They didn't erase the pattern that had been forming over the past 3 months: late, distracted, unreliable, words he'd never associated with himself before Ava's mom left. Ethan rubbed his face with both hands, trying to scrub away the fatigue that had become as much a part of him as his own skin. The presentation he'd been working on was due by end of day, a comprehensive marketing analysis for a client Victoria Hale herself was courting. Big money, big pressure, the kind of project that could make or break someone's standing in the company. And he was 47 minutes late on the day he was supposed to present the first draft. Rough morning? The voice came from behind him, and Ethan didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Marcus Chen, one of the senior analysts, had the desk 3 rows over. Good guy. Solid worker, the kind of person who probably had his life together in ways Ethan could only imagine. Flat tire, Ethan said, not looking up from his screen. He pulled up the presentation file, scanning through slides he'd stayed up until 2 a.m. perfecting. Got stuck on 101. That's brutal. Marcus set a fresh cup of coffee on Ethan's desk. Actual coffee, from the break room, still steaming. Figured you could use this more than whatever that is. He nodded toward the cold styrofoam cup. Ethan looked up, surprised by the gesture. Thanks, man. I owe you. You don't owe me anything? Marcus leaned against the cubicle wall, his voice dropping lower. But heads up, she was looking for you about 20 minutes ago. The temperature in Ethan's blood dropped several degrees. She. There was only one she in Hale Industries that made grown professionals speak in hushed tones. Victoria Hale. 30 years old, self-made billionaire, CEO of a company she'd built from nothing in less than a decade. Forbes had called her the most precise mind in modern business. Business Insider said she operated with surgical accuracy in all aspects of corporate strategy. Ethan had read the articles when he'd first gotten hired 2 years ago, back when landing a job at Hale Industries felt like winning the lottery. Back before his life had fallen apart. Did she say what she wanted? Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Marcus shook his head. Just asked where you were. I told her I didn't know. He paused, then added, Look, I don't know what's going on with you lately, but whatever it is, fix it. She doesn't give third chances. The implication hung in the air between them. Ethan had already used up his first and second. Yeah, Ethan said quietly. I know. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder once, then headed back to his own desk, leaving Ethan alone with the fresh coffee and the cold dread spreading through his gut. He pulled up his email, hoping maybe she'd sent a message instead of expecting a face-to-face. But there was nothing from Victoria Hale in his inbox. Nothing from HR either, which he supposed was a good sign. When HR got involved, things were already over. Ethan took a long drink of the coffee Marcus had brought. It was hot enough to burn his tongue, and he welcomed the distraction from the anxiety trying to claw its way up his throat. The presentation. Focus on the presentation. He clicked through the slides again, double-checking every chart, every data point, every transition. This had to be perfect. Not good. Perfect. The kind of work that reminded Victoria Hale why she'd hired him in the first place, before the tardiness and the early departures and the missed deadlines started piling up like evidence in a case he couldn't defend. "Mr. Cole?" The voice was quiet, controlled, and came from directly behind him. Ethan's entire body went rigid. He turned slowly in his chair, and there she was. Victoria Hale stood 3 feet away, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. Her dark hair was pulled back in a way that was somehow both severe and elegant, and her eyes, a shade of blue that reminded him of deep water, were fixed on him with an intensity that made him feel like she could see straight through to every inadequacy he was trying to hide. "Ms. Hale." Ethan stood up too quickly, nearly knocking over the fresh coffee. "I'm sorry about this morning. I had a flat tire on 101. She said it without inflection, stating a fact rather than accepting an excuse. "You left a voicemail." "Yes, ma'am." Something flickered across her expression, so brief Ethan almost missed it. Was it annoyance at being called ma'am? He had no idea. Reading Victoria Hale was like trying to read a book written in a language he'd never learned. "The Riverside presentation," she said. "I'd like to see your progress." Not a request, a statement of intent. Of course. Ethan gestured to his monitor, pulling up the slide deck with hands that he hoped weren't shaking visibly. "I've completed the market analysis and the competitive landscape overview. The ROI projections are finalized, and I'm currently working on the implementation timeline." Victoria stepped closer, her eyes scanning the screen with the kind of focus that made Ethan acutely aware of every pixel that might be out of place. She didn't say anything for a long moment, just read, absorbed, processed. The silence stretched out like taffy, thin and uncomfortable. "This data point." She tapped the screen with one perfectly manicured finger, indicating a graph on slide 7. "Your source?" "Department of Commerce report from Q2, published last month." "And you verified the methodology?" "Yes, ma'am. Cross-referenced with 3 independent analyses." Another flicker of something in her expression. This time Ethan was sure he saw it, a microscopic tightening around her eyes when he said "ma'am" again. He made a mental note to stop. "The implementation timeline," Victoria said, scrolling forward through the slides. "You're proposing a 6-month rollout." "Based on similar campaigns in the sector, yes. The data suggests Riverside wants aggressive. They want fast." She turned to look at him directly, and Ethan felt the full weight of her attention like a physical thing. "Can you deliver the same quality in 4 months?" Every instinct in his body wanted to say yes, to be the reliable employee she needed, the one who could rise to any challenge without hesitation. But Ethan had learned the hard way that overpromising was worse than underdelivering. "With the current resource allocation, 4 months would be tight," he said carefully. "I'd need additional support on the data analysis side, and we'd have to compress the testing phase, which carries risk." Victoria studied him for a moment that felt like an hour. "But it's possible," she said. Not a question. "It's possible." She nodded once, a small, precise movement. "Revise the timeline. I want to see the updated proposal by end of day Friday." "That's—" Ethan stopped himself before he could finish the sentence. "That's only 3 days away. That's impossible with everything else on my plate. That's going to require me pulling all-nighters I can't afford when I have a 5-year-old who needs me." But he didn't say any of that. "I'll have it ready," he said instead. Victoria's gaze held his for another beat, and Ethan had the strangest sensation that she was looking for something in his face, some sign or signal he didn't know how to give. Then the moment passed, and her expression returned to its usual carefully controlled neutrality. "Don't be late again, Mr. Cole." She walked away before he could respond, her heels clicking against the tile floor with a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. Ethan sank back into his chair, his heart pounding like he'd just run a sprint. His hands were shaking now, really shaking, not just the barely there tremor he'd managed to hide during the conversation. He picked up the coffee and took another long drink, trying to steady himself. 3 days. He had 3 days to completely revise a presentation that had already taken him weeks to build, and he'd have to do it while managing everything else that was barely holding together in his life. The phone in his pocket buzzed. Ethan pulled it out, and his stomach dropped when he saw the name on the screen. Ava's school. He answered on the second ring. "This is Ethan Cole." "Mr. Cole, this is Susan Ramirez from Sunshine Elementary." The woman's voice was kind but professional, the tone of someone who'd made this type of call 100 times before. "I'm calling about Ava. She's in the nurse's office with a fever. We need you to come pick her up." Of course this was happening now. "How high is the fever?" Ethan asked, already closing his laptop and gathering his things. "Just over 100. It's not serious, but per our policy." "I understand. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and stood, grabbing his jacket from the back of his chair. Marcus looked up from his desk as Ethan passed. "Everything okay?" "My daughter's sick. I have to leave." "Man, that's rough. Hope she feels better." "Yeah, thanks." Ethan made it to the elevator before the full weight of what was happening crashed down on him. He was leaving again. Less than 2 hours after arriving 47 minutes late, he was walking out the door. And Victoria Hale, who had just given him a deadline that would require every available hour he had, would see him go. The elevator doors opened, and Ethan stepped inside, pressing the button for the parking garage. As the doors slid closed, he caught a glimpse of the office behind him. All those people working, focused, successful. All those people who didn't have flat tires and sick kids, and lives that refused to cooperate with the demands of a career that was slipping through their fingers. The doors shut, cutting off the view. Ethan leaned back against the elevator wall and closed his eyes. "Hold it together," he told himself. "Just hold it together a little longer." But he didn't know how much longer he could. The drive to Sunshine Elementary took 19 minutes in midday traffic. Ethan parked in the visitor lot and walked quickly across the playground, where the sounds of recess echoed off the brick building. Kids laughing, shouting, playing games whose rules seemed to change by the minute. Inside, the school smelled like cafeteria food and cleaning products, and that particular scent of childhood that Ethan couldn't quite name but recognized instantly. He signed in at the front office and followed the familiar path to the nurse's suite. Ava was sitting on the examination table, her small legs dangling over the edge. She looked tiny in that space, 5 years old and maybe 40 pounds, with dark curls that always seemed to escape whatever method Ethan tried to contain them. Her backpack, covered in dinosaur patches she'd insisted on adding herself, sat on the chair beside her. When she saw him, her face crumpled. "Daddy?" Ethan's heart broke and mended simultaneously, a sensation he'd gotten used to in the 5 years since she'd been born. "Hey, sweetheart." He crossed the room in 3 strides and gathered her into his arms. She was warm, too warm, and she buried her face against his shoulder. "I hear you're not feeling so great." "My throat hurts," Ava mumbled against his shirt. "And my head." The nurse, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a name tag that read Carol, gave Ethan a sympathetic smile. "Looks like it might be the bug that's been going around. Nothing serious, but she'll need to stay home until the fever breaks. At least 24 hours. At least 24 hours. Ethan did the math automatically. Today was Tuesday. If Ava couldn't go back to school until Thursday at the earliest, that meant he'd need to find coverage for tomorrow, and possibly Thursday morning. His regular babysitter was out of town. His parents lived 3 states away. Ava's mom, no. He wasn't going down that road. Not today. "Okay," Ethan said, keeping his voice steady for Ava's sake. "Thank you for calling me." "Of course, feel better, sweetie." Carol patted Ava's shoulder gently. Ethan carried his daughter out to the car, even though she was old enough to walk. She wrapped her arms around his neck and held on tight, and he could feel the heat radiating off her small body. By the time he got her buckled into her car seat, she was already half asleep. The drive home was quiet, except for the soft sounds of Ava's breathing in the back seat. Ethan's mind was racing through contingencies, backup plans, scenarios where this might somehow work out. But every path led to the same conclusion. He was going to have to take time off work. Again. Their apartment was on the third floor of a building that had seen better decades. Ethan carried Ava up the stairs and unlocked the door with the hand that wasn't supporting her weight. Inside, the space was small but clean, or at least as clean as he could manage with a 5-year-old in a 60-hour work week. Dishes in the sink from breakfast, Ava's drawings covering the refrigerator, toys in a basket by the TV that never quite stayed organized, no matter how many times he tried. Home. He set Ava down on the couch and felt her forehead. Still warm. Let's get you some medicine, okay? Then you can rest. Can I watch Moana? Ava asked, her voice small and hoarse. Yeah, baby. You can watch Moana. Ethan got her set up with the movie and a blanket, then went to the bathroom to find the children's fever reducer. The bottle was almost empty. He'd need to pick up more. Add that to the list. He gave Ava the proper dose, then sat next to her on the couch, stroking her hair while the familiar opening music of the movie filled the small living room. His phone buzzed in his pocket. For a second, Ethan considered ignoring it, but that was a luxury he couldn't afford. He pulled it out carefully, trying not to disturb Ava. Email from Victoria Hale. His pulse jumped. He opened the message. Mr. Cole, I noticed you left the office. I assume there's a situation that required your immediate attention. Please confirm your status and expected return time. V. Hale short, direct, impossible to read any emotion into. Ethan stared at the message for a long moment, his thumb hovering over the reply button. What was he supposed to say? My daughter is sick, and I'm the only parent she has, so I'm going to be out at least tomorrow, and possibly longer? I know this looks terrible, but I literally have no other option? He started typing. Ms. Hale, my daughter has a fever and needed to be picked up from school. I'll be working remotely for the remainder of today and will keep you updated on my availability for tomorrow. The Riverside presentation remains on track for Friday delivery. Ethan Cole. He hit send before he could second-guess the wording. On the TV, Moana was discovering the heart of Te Fiti. Ava's breathing had evened out into the rhythm of sleep, her small hand curled against the blanket. Ethan carefully extracted himself from the couch and went to the kitchen, pulling out his laptop. Working remotely sounded good in theory. In practice, it meant balancing his computer on the tiny kitchen table while keeping one eye on his sleeping daughter and trying to revise an entire presentation in an apartment where the Wi-Fi cut out every 20 minutes. But he'd make it work. He always made it work. He had to. The rest of Tuesday disappeared in a blur of slides and data and periodic checks on Ava's temperature. By midnight, Ethan had managed to compress the implementation timeline from 6 months to 4 without completely destroying the quality of the proposal. It wasn't his best work, not by a long shot, but it was solid enough to present. Ava's fever had come down by evening, but she was still warm and lethargic. Ethan set up a makeshift bed for himself on the floor next to her room, just in case she needed him during the night. She called for him twice, once because she had a bad dream, once because she needed water. Both times, he was there in seconds. Wednesday morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through the apartment windows, and Ava's temperature back up to 100.3. No school, no daycare, no babysitter. Ethan called his supervisor and explained the situation. The understanding in the man's voice felt genuine, but Ethan could hear the subtext underneath. This is becoming a pattern. He worked from the couch while Ava dozed on and off, moving between the presentation and his regular assignments with the kind of fractured attention that guaranteed neither would get done well. Around 2 p.m., his laptop froze for the third time, and Ethan had to resist the urge to throw it across the room. His phone rang. Unknown number. Ethan answered anyway. This is Ethan Cole. Mr. Cole, this is Jennifer from Riverside Marketing Group. I'm calling to confirm your presentation slot for next Monday morning. Ethan's mind went blank. I'm sorry, Monday? Yes, didn't Ms. Hale's office contact you? The timeline has been moved up. Mr. Riverside wants to see the proposal Monday at 9 a.m. instead of the end of next week. Instead of Friday. Instead of the deadline Victoria had given him. No, Ethan stopped himself. Getting angry at Jennifer wouldn't help. Thank you for letting me know. I'll be ready Monday morning. Wonderful. We're looking forward to it. She hung up. Ethan sat very still on the couch, his phone in his hand, processing what had just happened. The deadline had moved up. 5 days had become 5 days, including a weekend where Ava would still need him, and he was already behind because of today. On the cushion beside him, Ava stirred and opened her eyes. "Daddy? Can I have some juice?" "Yeah, baby, hold on." Ethan got up and went to the kitchen, moving on autopilot while his mind raced through calculations that didn't add up, no matter how he arranged them. He poured apple juice into Ava's favorite cup, the one with the butterflies, and brought it back to the couch. She took it with both hands and drank slowly, watching him with eyes that seemed too observant for a 5-year-old. "Are you sad?" she asked. The question caught him off guard. "No, sweetheart, I'm not sad." "You look sad." Ethan sat down next to her and pulled her into his lap, careful not to spill the juice. "I'm just tired, but I'm okay. I promise." Ava leaned back against his chest, apparently satisfied with the answer. On the TV, another movie was playing, something with talking animals that Ethan had stopped paying attention to hours ago. His phone buzzed with another email. Victoria Hale again. "Mr. Cole, I've been informed that Riverside has moved the presentation to Monday morning. I trust this doesn't present a conflict with your current situation. Please confirm you'll be prepared to present. V. Hale." Ethan closed his eyes and counted to 10. Then he typed his response. "Ms. Hale, confirmed. I'll be ready Monday morning." Ethan Cole Short. Professional. Giving absolutely no indication that he had no idea how he was going to make that happen. He set the phone face down on the couch and wrapped both arms around his daughter, holding her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the ground. "Can we read a story?" Ava asked, her voice still hoarse but stronger than it had been this morning. "Sure thing. Pick one out." She wiggled out of his lap and went to the small bookshelf by the window, running her finger along the spines until she found the one she wanted. Green Eggs and Ham. The same book she'd been picking for 3 weeks straight. Ethan read it to her with the kind of automatic performance that came from repetition, his voice doing the character voices while his mind spun through a dozen different problems he couldn't solve. When he finished, Ava immediately handed him another book, then another. By the time she finally fell asleep again, it was almost 5 p.m., and Ethan had read 17 picture books without absorbing a single word. He carefully moved Ava back to her bed, tucking the covers around her and placing her favorite stuffed dinosaur, a bright purple T-Rex named Barney, next to her on the pillow. She didn't stir. Back in the living room, Ethan opened his laptop and stared at the presentation that would determine whether he still had a career next week. The slides looked back at him, full of data and analysis and carefully constructed arguments that felt increasingly meaningless in the face of everything else falling apart around him. But he didn't have the luxury of meaninglessness. He had rent to pay, insurance to maintain, a daughter who needed things like food and medicine, and a father who wasn't completely breaking under the weight of trying to be enough for both of them. Ethan rolled his shoulders, trying to work out the knots that had taken up permanent residence there, and started typing. He worked until 2 a.m., until his eyes burned and his back ached, and the words on the screen started blurring together. Then he saved everything, backed it up in 3 different places, and finally allowed himself to sleep. 4 hours later, Ava's alarm went off. Thursday morning. Temperature 99.1. Close enough to send her back to school. Ethan got her dressed and fed and out the door by 7:30, dropping her off with a hug that lasted maybe a second too long. She didn't complain, just squeezed him back and ran off to join her friends on the playground like the past 2 days hadn't happened. Resilience, Ethan thought as he drove toward Hale Industries. Kids had it in spades. Adults had to fake it. He made it to the office by 8:15, early for once. The presentation occupied every spare moment of Thursday and Friday. Ethan worked through lunch, stayed late both nights, and revised the timeline 3 more times before he was finally satisfied it could survive Victoria Hale's scrutiny. By Friday at 6 p.m., when he finally sent the updated proposal to her email, he felt like he'd run a marathon while carrying a boulder uphill. Her response came back in less than 10 minutes. "Mr. Cole, this is acceptable. We'll review together Monday morning at 7 a.m. before the Riverside meeting. Don't be late. V." Hale Ethan read the message twice, looking for any hint of acknowledgement that he'd just pulled off something borderline miraculous. But there was nothing except the usual precise professionalism. "This is acceptable. Not good. Not impressive. Acceptable. He closed his laptop and drove home, stopping at the grocery store to pick up the ingredients for Ava's favorite dinner. Spaghetti with butter and parmesan, nothing fancy, but she loved it. When he got back to the apartment, she was waiting by the door, having been dropped off by the after-school program 10 minutes earlier. "Daddy!" She launched herself at his legs, wrapping her arms around his knees. "Can we play Candyland tonight?" Ethan looked down at his daughter, healthy again, smiling again, completely unaware of how close he'd come to completely falling apart this week, and felt something loosen in his chest. "Yeah, baby, we can play Candyland." They made dinner together, with Ava standing on a step stool to help stir the pasta. They played 3 rounds of Candyland, and Ava won twice. They read bedtime stories until she fell asleep mid-sentence, her head on his shoulder. Ethan carried her to bed, tucked her in, and stood in the doorway for a moment watching her sleep. This was why he did it. All of it. The late nights and the impossible deadlines and the constant feeling of being stretched too thin. This small person who trusted him completely to keep her world safe and stable and full of love. He just hoped he could keep doing it long enough for her to remember him as someone who tried, not someone who failed. Monday would tell. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, with the kind of weather that matched Ethan's anxiety perfectly. He dropped Ava off at school at 7:15 and made it to Hale Industries by 6:50, 10 minutes early. A personal record for the past month. Victoria's office was on the top floor in a corner suite that overlooked the city. Ethan had only been inside twice before, once during his initial interview, once during his annual review. Both times, the space had felt more like a museum than a workplace. Immaculate, carefully curated, giving away nothing about the person who occupied it. He took the elevator up at exactly 6:57, carrying his laptop and a leather portfolio that he'd owned since college. His hands weren't shaking, which he counted as a victory. Victoria's assistant, a woman named Rebecca who seemed to run on efficiency and espresso, looked up when he approached. "Mr. Cole, she's expecting you. Go ahead in." Ethan knocked twice on the door, then entered when he heard Victoria's voice call out. The office looked exactly as he remembered, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, a desk that probably cost more than his car. Victoria stood by the window, phone pressed to her ear, one hand gesturing slightly as she spoke. "Understand your concerns, but the data supports the projection. We'll have the full analysis to you by Wednesday." She paused, listening. "Yes, thank you." She ended the call and turned to face Ethan, her expression unreadable as always. "Mr. Cole, you're early." Seemed appropriate, given the circumstances. Was that almost a smile? Ethan couldn't tell. "Let's see what you have." He set up his laptop on the conference table by the window, pulling up the presentation while Victoria took a seat across from him. The morning light coming through the windows cast everything in sharp relief, making the data on his screen look almost too vivid. Ethan started with the executive summary, walking through each slide with the kind of practiced confidence that he definitely didn't feel. Victoria watched without interruption, her blue eyes tracking every transition, every data point, every word he said. When he reached the revised timeline, 4 months instead of 6, with detailed breakdowns of each phase, she held up one hand. "Stop there." Ethan stopped. Victoria leaned forward, studying the screen with an intensity that made him want to check if he'd missed something critical. She didn't say anything for a long moment, just read and processed and evaluated with that surgical precision everyone talked about. "This resource allocation," she finally said, tapping one of the charts. "You're assuming full availability of the analytics team for the entire 4 months." "Yes, based on their current project load is about to change. We just signed the Henderson account. That team is going to be split between this and Henderson starting next week." Ethan felt his stomach drop. "I wasn't aware of the Henderson account." "It hasn't been announced yet." Victoria sat back in her chair, her gaze still fixed on him. "So the question is, can you make this work with half the analytics support you were counting on?" This was a test. Ethan knew it immediately. The kind of test where the right answer mattered less than how he arrived at it. "Not without adjusting either the scope or the timeline," he said carefully. "If we keep the 4-month deadline, we'd need to narrow the initial rollout to focus on Riverside's primary markets instead of their full territory. If we want comprehensive coverage, we'd need to extend back to 5 months minimum. Riverside wants comprehensive in 4 months. Then Riverside needs to provide additional resources or accept increased risk in the execution phase. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them, a subtle recalibration, like a lock clicking into place. Good, she said quietly. Don't make promises you can't keep just because a client wants to hear them. Ethan exhaled slowly. Understood. They continued through the rest of the presentation, with Victoria asking questions that ranged from granular details about data sourcing to broader strategic considerations about market positioning. By the time they finished, Ethan's shirt was sticking to his back despite the air conditioning, and he'd filled 4 pages in his notebook with adjustments and action items. Victoria closed his laptop and stood, smoothing her already perfect suit jacket. The Riverside meeting is at 9, she said. We'll present this together. I'll handle the strategic overview. You'll walk through the implementation details. Questions? No, ma'am. He caught himself. No, Ms. Hale. That flicker of something crossed her face again, the same micro-expression he'd seen before when he called her ma'am. But this time, instead of moving past it, she stopped. You can call me Victoria, she said, when we're alone. Ms. Hale is for clients and board meetings. Ethan blinked, genuinely surprised. Okay, thank you. She nodded once, then checked her watch. We have 90 minutes. Get some coffee. You look like you need it. It wasn't said unkindly, but it still landed with the weight of truth. Ethan knew exactly what he looked like. Exhausted, stretched thin, barely holding it together. I'll be ready, he said. Victoria walked toward the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. She turned back to look at him, and for just a second, her carefully controlled expression slipped into something else, something that looked almost like concern. Mr. Cole, she said quietly, are you okay? The question hit him like a physical blow, because no one had asked him that in months. Not his supervisor, not his coworkers, not even his parents during their weekly phone calls. Everyone saw the surface, the late arrivals, the early departures, the pattern of unreliability, but no one had bothered to ask what was underneath. Until now. Until Victoria Hale, Billionaire CEO, the most precise mind in modern business, looked at him with those impossibly blue eyes and asked a question that suggested she actually saw him as something more than just another employee disappointing her expectations. Ethan wanted to tell the truth. He wanted to say, no, I'm not okay. I'm drowning. I'm failing at everything that matters. I'm terrified that one more thing going wrong will break me completely, and Ava will be the one who pays for it. But this was still his boss. This was still a professional relationship, and showing that kind of vulnerability to someone who held his career in her hands seemed like a catastrophically bad idea. So instead, he smiled, the practiced smile he'd gotten good at wearing, and said, I'm fine. Thank you for asking. Victoria held his gaze for another beat, and Ethan had the distinct impression that she knew exactly what he wasn't saying. But she didn't push. She just nodded slowly, opened the door, and left him alone in her office with 90 minutes until a meeting that could change everything. Ethan gathered his things and headed downstairs to get that coffee she'd recommended. He had a feeling he was going to need it. The Riverside presentation went better than Ethan had any right to expect. Victoria handled the room like she'd been born to it, commanding without being aggressive, persuasive without seeming desperate. She walked the client through the strategic vision with the kind of clarity that made complex ideas feel inevitable. And when she handed the floor to Ethan for the implementation details, the transition was so smooth he almost forgot to be nervous. Almost. He stumbled once, on a data point about regional demographics, but recovered quickly enough that Mr. Riverside, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and a golf tan, didn't seem to notice. By the time Ethan finished the timeline breakdown, answering questions about resource allocation and risk mitigation with the confidence of someone who'd actually slept more than 4 hours, the mood in the room had shifted from skeptical to genuinely interested. I'll be honest, Riverside said, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed. When you called to move up the timeline, I thought we were going to see something half-baked. This is solid work. Victoria didn't smile, but Ethan caught the slightest relaxation in her shoulders. We don't do half-baked, Mr. Riverside. If we take on a project, we deliver. I can see that. Riverside stood, extending his hand across the conference table. Let me talk to my team. We'll have an answer for you by Wednesday. They shook hands. First Victoria, then Ethan. And within minutes, the Riverside team was filing out of the conference room, taking their leather portfolios and expensive watches with them. The door closed. Silence filled the space. Ethan exhaled for what felt like the first time in 2 hours. "That went well?" he said, more to himself than to Victoria. She was gathering her materials, sliding papers back into folders with the kind of precision that seemed to govern everything she did. "It went adequately. Riverside's team still has concerns about the compressed timeline. But they're interested." "Interest doesn't sign contracts, Mr. Cole." The formality was back, Mr. Cole instead of the first-name basis she'd offered in her office. Ethan wondered if that had just been a temporary thing, a moment of humanity that had already passed. Victoria snapped her briefcase closed and looked at him directly. "You handled the questions well, particularly the one about the analytics team split." It was the closest thing to praise Ethan had heard from her in months, and he hated how much it mattered to him. "Thank you. I appreciate that." "Don't appreciate it. Maintain it." She checked her watch, a sleek piece that probably cost more than Ethan made in 6 months. "I have a board call in 15 minutes. We'll debrief this afternoon if Riverside responds early, otherwise Wednesday morning." "Understood." Victoria walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the polished floor with that same precise rhythm. But this time she paused before leaving. "Mr. Cole?" Ethan looked up. "Yes?" She seemed to be choosing her words carefully, which was unusual for someone who normally spoke with absolute certainty. "The work you did on this proposal, under the circumstances, was impressive." Under the circumstances. Those 3 words carried the weight of everything unsaid between them. She knew. Maybe not the details, maybe not the full picture, but Victoria Hale knew that something in Ethan's life was barely holding together, and she was acknowledging, in her own carefully controlled way, that he'd delivered anyway. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly. Victoria nodded once, then left. Ethan stood alone in the conference room, surrounded by the remnants of a presentation that might save his job or might just delay the inevitable. He couldn't tell which. His phone buzzed, text message from Ava's school. His heart rate spiked before he even read it. "Mr. Cole, this is the front office. Ava is fine, but there was a small incident on the playground during recess. She scraped her knee pretty badly. The nurse cleaned it up, but we wanted to let you know. No need to pick her up. She's back in class." Ethan read the message 3 times, his hands gripping the phone tighter than necessary. Ava was fine. She was back in class. There was no emergency. But the adrenaline was already coursing through his system, and it took a full minute for his breathing to return to normal. This was his life now, a constant state of bracing for the next crisis, the next call, the next thing that would require him to be in 2 places at once and do the impossible with resources he didn't have. He texted back a quick thank you to the school office, then gathered his own materials and headed back to his desk. The rest of Monday disappeared in a blur of catch-up work and emails. Tuesday was worse. A system outage in the morning that delayed everything, followed by an emergency meeting about the Henderson account that Victoria had mentioned. By the time Ethan left the office Tuesday evening, it was nearly 7 p.m., and he was running on fumes and bad coffee. He picked up Ava from the after-school program with 15 minutes to spare before they closed. She ran to him with her usual enthusiasm, completely unfazed by the bandage on her knee. "Daddy, look what I made." She shoved a piece of construction paper in his face, a drawing of what appeared to be a dinosaur fighting a rainbow. Or maybe dancing with it. Ethan couldn't quite tell. "That's beautiful, baby. Is that Barney?" "No, it's a different dinosaur, a stegosaurus. His name is Kevin. Kevin the stegosaurus. Got it." They drove home with Ava chattering about her day, who said what at recess, what they had for snack, how her friend Emma lost a tooth and got to put it in a special box. Normal kid stuff. The kind of stuff that made Ethan's chest ache with how much he loved her, and how terrified he was of screwing this up. Dinner was chicken nuggets and carrot sticks, because Ethan didn't have the energy for anything more complicated. Ava ate 3 nuggets and complained that the carrots were too crunchy, which seemed like a fundamental misunderstanding of what carrots were supposed to be. But Ethan was too tired to argue. Bath time, story time, bedtime. By 8:30, Ava was asleep, and Ethan was sitting on the couch with his laptop open, trying to make progress on a report that was due Thursday. The words on the screen kept blurring together, rearranging themselves into nonsense. He needed sleep, but he also needed to finish this report. The two needs were incompatible, and Ethan was running out of ways to reconcile them. His phone rang. Unknown number again. Ethan answered, expecting maybe a spam call or possibly the school with another update. "This is Ethan Cole." "Mr. Cole, this is Patricia from Sunshine Elementary." His stomach dropped. "Is Ava okay?" "She's fine, I promise. I'm calling about a different matter. We have a situation with tomorrow's field trip." Field trip. Right. Ava had been talking about it for a week. Some kind of science museum excursion that required a permission slip Ethan had signed and promptly forgotten about. "What kind of situation?" he asked carefully. "We're short on parent chaperones. 2 of our volunteers had to cancel last minute, and we need at least 1 more adult to maintain the proper ratio. I know this is incredibly short notice, but I was hoping you might be available tomorrow. It's from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. 9 to 2, 5 hours. On a Wednesday when Ethan had 3 meetings scheduled and a deadline that was already going to be tight. Ethan stopped, the refusal already forming on his lips. But then he thought about Ava's face when she talked about the field trip. How excited she'd been. How she'd made him promise he'd ask about volunteering, and he'd said he would but never actually did because he knew his schedule wouldn't allow it. How many times had he already said no to her this month? "Yes," Ethan heard himself say. "I can do it." "Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Cole. I'll add you to the list. Just meet us at the school tomorrow at 8:45. She hung up before Ethan could change his mind. He sat on the couch, staring at his phone, processing what he'd just agreed to. 5 hours away from work. 5 hours that would put him even further behind on everything he was already barely managing. But Ava would be there. And for once, he'd get to be the parent who showed up. That had to count for something. Wednesday morning arrived with a sky that looked like it couldn't decide between rain and shine. Ethan got Ava up early, helped her pick out her favorite dinosaur shirt for the museum, and packed her lunch with extra snacks because field trips apparently required more food than normal school days. They arrived at Sunshine Elementary at 8:40, and Ava's entire face lit up when she realized her dad was one of the chaperones. "You came!" She grabbed his hand and dragged him toward the group of kids gathering by the school buses. "Emma, this is my dad. He's coming with us." Emma, a small girl with glasses and pigtails, looked up at Ethan with the kind of serious expression only 6-year-olds could pull off. "Does he know about the dinosaurs?" "I know some things about dinosaurs," Ethan admitted. "Do you know about the Cretaceous period?" That's when the T-Rex lived, but not the Stegosaurus. The Stegosaurus was Jurassic." "Good to know," Ethan said, genuinely impressed. The teacher in charge, Mrs. Hoffman, a woman who looked like she'd been teaching kindergarten since the beginning of time, gathered the parents together for a quick briefing. Ethan ended up assigned to a group of 5 kids, including Ava and Emma, which seemed manageable until they all started talking at once on the bus ride to the museum. The Science Museum was downtown, in a building that looked like it had been designed by someone who really loved geometric shapes. Inside, it was chaos. School groups everywhere, kids running between exhibits, the sound of excitement echoing off the high ceilings. Ethan kept his group together through sheer force of counting every 30 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. "Okay, we're good. Stay where I can see you." They went through the dinosaur exhibit first, which was apparently the main event. Ava and Emma led the charge, pointing out every fossil and reading the plaques with intense concentration. The other 3 kids in the group, 2 boys named Tyler and Marcus, and a quiet girl named Sophie, followed along with varying levels of interest. "Mr. Cole, is a pterodactyl a dinosaur?" Tyler asked, staring up at a replica skeleton suspended from the ceiling. "I think it's technically a flying reptile, not a dinosaur," Ethan said, trying to remember fragments of information from nature documentaries he'd watched years ago. "See, I told you," Marcus punched Tyler's arm lightly. "Flying reptile." "But it lived with dinosaurs," Tyler argued. "Still not a dinosaur." Ethan let them debate while keeping one eye on the girls, who had moved on to the next exhibit, something about plate tectonics. Sophie wandered over to an interactive display and started pressing buttons with the kind of focus that suggested she'd found her calling. For about 45 minutes, everything went smoothly. Then Tyler announced he had to go to the bathroom. Okay, buddy, let's find the restrooms. Ethan started herding the group toward the signs that indicated facilities, doing another quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4. He stopped. 4 kids. There should be 5. Ethan's heart went straight to his throat. Where's Sophie? The kids looked around, suddenly realizing one of their group was missing. She was just here, Ava said, her eyes wide. She was looking at the rocks, Emma added. Ethan spun back toward the plate tectonics exhibit, scanning the crowd of children and adults for Sophie's pink jacket. He couldn't see her. The museum was packed, and every direction looked like a sea of moving bodies. Stay right here, Ethan told the remaining 4 kids, using his serious dad voice. Do not move. I mean it. He walked quickly back toward the last place he'd seen Sophie, his pulse hammering in his ears. Lost kid. He'd lost a kid on a field trip. This was every parent chaperone's nightmare, and it was happening to him in real time. Sophie, he called out, trying not to sound as panicked as he felt. Sophie, where are you? A small hand tugged on his sleeve. Ethan looked down, and there she was, Sophie, completely unharmed, holding a small rock she'd apparently picked up from somewhere. I found this, she said quietly, showing him the rock like it was a treasure. Relief hit Ethan so hard he almost sat down right there on the museum floor. Sophie, you can't wander off like that. You have to stay with the group, okay? She nodded, still clutching the rock. Okay, let's get back to everyone else. He took her hand and walked back to where he'd left the other 4 kids, who were thankfully still standing in the exact spot he'd told them to stay. Ethan counted again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and exhaled slowly. Crisis averted. The rest of the field trip passed without incident, though Ethan's nerves were shot by the time they loaded back onto the buses. Ava fell asleep on the ride back to school, her head resting against his shoulder, completely exhausted from the excitement. When they arrived back at Sunshine Elementary, Mrs. Hoffman thanked all the parent volunteers with the kind of gratitude that suggested she knew exactly how stressful the experience had been. You did great, Mr. Cole, she said, patting his arm. We'd love to have you volunteer again sometime. Ethan smiled and made non-committal noises while internally thinking there was no way he could survive another field trip. He checked his phone once he was back in his car. 7 missed calls from work. 4 voicemails. 11 emails flagged as urgent. His stomach sank. The first voicemail was from his supervisor asking where he was. The second was from Marcus Chen giving him a heads up that Victoria was looking for him. The third was from Victoria herself. Mr. Cole, I need you to call me back as soon as possible. There's been a development with the Riverside account. Her voice was calm, controlled, giving away nothing about whether this development was good or bad. Ethan called her back immediately. She answered on the second ring. Where are you? Ethan hesitated, suddenly aware that volunteering at my daughter's field trip might not sound like a great excuse for missing an entire workday. I had a family commitment. I notified my supervisor yesterday. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Did you? It wasn't a question. Yes, Ethan said, though the sinking feeling in his gut suggested that somewhere in the chaos of Tuesday evening, he'd forgotten to actually send that email. Mr. Cole, I need you in my office first thing tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Is this about Riverside? 7 a.m. Don't be late. She hung up. Ethan sat in his car in the school parking lot, staring at his phone like it had personally betrayed him. He'd forgotten to notify his supervisor. In the rush of agreeing to chaperone and getting Ava ready and managing the morning routine, he'd completely forgotten to send the email explaining his absence, which meant Victoria had spent the entire day looking for him, not knowing where he was or why he wasn't responding, which meant he looked exactly like the unreliable employee everyone probably already thought he was. Ethan dropped his phone in the cup holder and pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to push back the frustration and exhaustion and fear that were all competing for space in his head. He'd made it through the Riverside presentation. He'd chaperoned the field trip without losing any children permanently. He'd held everything together with duct tape and determination, and somehow it still wasn't enough. By the time Ethan picked up Ava from the after-school program, because he couldn't exactly bring her to work with him after already missing the entire day. It was almost 6 p.m. She was still buzzing with excitement about the museum, recounting every detail of the dinosaur exhibit and the planetarium show they'd watched. And then the stars started moving, and Mrs. Hoffman said it was because the Earth rotates. And did you know we're spinning right now, but we can't feel it? I did know that, Ethan said, trying to match her enthusiasm while his brain spun through worst-case scenarios for tomorrow morning's meeting. Can we get pizza for dinner? Sure, baby. Pizza sounds good. They picked up a small pepperoni pizza from the place 2 blocks from their apartment, and Ava talked through dinner while Ethan nodded and responded at what he hoped were appropriate moments. His mind was elsewhere, running through explanations, apologies, ways to salvage whatever damage he'd done by disappearing for an entire day. After Ava went to bed, Ethan opened his laptop and started working on the report that was due tomorrow. He worked until midnight, until his vision blurred and his fingers fumbled on the keyboard. Then he forced himself to sleep, setting 3 alarms to make absolutely certain he wouldn't be late tomorrow morning. Thursday arrived gray and cold, with rain that started around 5 a.m. and showed no signs of stopping. Ethan dropped Ava off at school by 7:15 and made it to Hale Industries by 6:50, 10 minutes early. Again. Rebecca looked up when he approached Victoria's office. She's expecting you. Go ahead. Ethan knocked twice, then entered. Victoria was standing by the window, looking out at the rain-soaked city below. She turned when she heard the door close. Mr. Cole, sit. Not an invitation, a command. Ethan sat in one of the chairs across from her desk, his hands folded in his lap to keep them from shaking. Victoria didn't sit. She stayed standing, which put her at a height advantage that felt intentional. Yesterday, she said simply. Explain. My daughter's school needed a chaperone for a field trip. I volunteered, without notifying your supervisor. I meant to send an email. I forgot. You forgot. Victoria's voice was flat, emotionless. The same way you forgot to arrive on time 3 weeks ago. The same way you forgot we had a team meeting 2 Thursdays ago and I had to have Rebecca track you down. Each question landed like a small cut. Miss Hale. Victoria. I know how this looks. Do you? She finally moved, crossing to her desk and pulling out a folder. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like an employee who consistently fails to meet basic professional standards, late arrivals, unexplained absences, missed communications. She opened the folder and slid it across the desk toward him. Ethan looked down and felt his blood turn to ice. It was a performance review, his performance review, and it was dated for today. HR wanted to have this conversation 2 weeks ago, Victoria said quietly. I delayed it. I told them you were handling a complex project and deserved the benefit of the doubt. I appreciate I'm not finished. Her voice cut through his attempt to speak with surgical precision. The Riverside account came through yesterday. They signed. It's a significant contract, and your work on that proposal was a major factor in their decision. Ethan's heart, which had been sinking steadily since he walked into the office, suddenly stuttered. They signed? Yes, which is why I'm going to ask you one more time, and I need you to give me an honest answer. Victoria leaned forward, her hands flat on the desk, her eyes locked on his. Are you okay? There it was again, that same question she'd asked before the Riverside presentation. But this time, she wasn't going to accept a polite deflection. Ethan looked at the performance review sitting on the desk between them. He looked at Victoria Hale, Billionaire CEO, one of the most powerful people in the industry, asking him a question that no one else had bothered to ask. And for the first time in months, he told the truth. No, he said quietly. I'm not okay. Victoria didn't move, didn't speak, just waited. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. My daughter's mother left 3 years ago. Just left. No custody fight, no visitation, nothing. It's just me and Ava now, and I'm trying to be enough for both of us, but I'm not. I'm barely keeping us afloat. Every morning is a negotiation between getting to work on time and making sure she has everything she needs for school. Every evening is trying to be present for her while finishing work I couldn't complete during the day because I had to leave early for pickup, or because she was sick, or because there was some crisis I couldn't predict. He paused, realizing he was rambling, But Victoria's expression hadn't changed. She was listening. Actually, listening. The flat tire 3 weeks ago was real, Ethan continued. So was Ava being sick. So was yesterday's field trip. None of it is made up. But I know that doesn't matter because the pattern is still the pattern. And from the outside, it looks like I'm just not committed to this job. And maybe I'm not committed enough. Maybe I can't be. Because I've got this 5-year-old kid who needs me more than this company does. And when I have to choose between her and a meeting, I'm going to choose her every single time. He stopped talking, suddenly aware that he'd just said too much. Way too much. You didn't unload your entire personal life on your boss, especially not when you were already on thin ice. But the words were out, and there was no taking them back. Victoria straightened, her expression still unreadable. She walked back to the window, her back to him. The silence stretched out for what felt like hours. "I didn't know about your daughter's mother," she finally said, her voice quieter than before. "No one here does. I didn't think it was relevant. It's relevant if it's affecting your ability to do your job. I know that. I'm trying. I know you're trying." Victoria turned back to face him, and something in her expression had shifted. The ice was still there, but underneath it, Ethan thought he could see something that looked almost like understanding. "The work you produce when you're here is exceptional. The Riverside proposal, the Henderson analysis last quarter. You're one of the strongest analysts I have. But I'm unreliable. You're managing an impossible situation with insufficient support." She crossed back to her desk and picked up the performance review. "HR wanted this to be a termination meeting. I pushed back. I told them we'd implement a performance improvement plan instead." Ethan's chest tightened. A PIP, the corporate kiss of death. Everyone knew that performance improvement plans were just the paperwork trail before firing someone. "However," Victoria continued, "I'm going to do something different." She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a different document, a single sheet of paper that she slid across the desk to replace the review. Ethan picked it up, scanning the contents. It was a schedule modification request. Flexible hours, remote work options 2 days per week, adjusted performance metrics that accounted for family responsibilities. "I don't understand," Ethan said slowly. "You're carrying too much alone," Victoria said, "and this company benefits from your work. Those two facts don't have to be incompatible. You're offering me flex time. I'm offering you the tools to succeed here without sacrificing your daughter's well-being. The work still needs to be done, and done well. But the rigid 9-to-5 structure clearly isn't serving either of us." Ethan stared at the document, reading it again to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. "Why?" "Because I don't believe in wasting good talent over fixable logistics." Victoria sat down in her chair, her posture relaxing slightly. "And because I remember what it was like to be underestimated because of circumstances outside my control." It was the most personal thing she'd ever said to him. "Thank you," Ethan managed. Thank you." "Don't thank me. Make it work." Victoria's professional mask slid back into place, but it felt less impenetrable than before. "The Riverside account is officially yours to manage. They requested you specifically for the implementation team. Show me that my faith in you isn't misplaced." Ethan stood holding the schedule modification like it was made of glass. "You won't regret this." "I know I won't." She turned back to her computer, already moving on to the next item on her agenda. "Close the door on your way out." Ethan walked out of Victoria Hale's office in a daze. Rebecca smiled at him as he passed. A real smile, not the professional courtesy she usually offered. And Ethan wondered if maybe she'd known what was happening in there. If maybe she'd been rooting for him. He made it back to his desk before the full weight of what had just happened settled over him. Victoria Hale had seen him. Not just the unreliable employee, not just the pattern of tardiness and absences. She'd seen the person underneath, the father trying desperately to hold his life together, and instead of cutting him loose, she'd thrown him a lifeline. Ethan sat down at his desk and opened his laptop, pulling up the Riverside project files with new energy coursing through him. He was going to make this work. He had to. Because someone had finally chosen to see him, and he wasn't going to waste it. The flex schedule changed things, but not in the ways Ethan had expected. It didn't make his life easier exactly. Ava still got sick. Deadlines still piled up. The car still made that weird rattling noise he couldn't afford to get checked out. But what changed was the constant feeling of being one step away from disaster. Now, when he needed to leave early for a parent-teacher conference or work from home because the school had an unexpected closure, it didn't feel like he was stealing time or making excuses. It was built into the structure, accounted for. The first week under the new arrangement, Ethan worked from home on Tuesday and Thursday. He finished the initial Riverside implementation framework while Ava watched cartoons in the living room, periodically wandering over to show him her drawings or ask for snacks. It wasn't ideal. His productivity took a hit every time she interrupted, but he made it work. And more importantly, he made his deadlines. By the second week, the anxiety that had been living in his chest like a permanent resident started to loosen its grip. Not gone, not even close, but manageable, breathable. Marcus noticed during lunch on a Wednesday in mid-November. They were sitting in the break room, Ethan eating leftover pasta while Marcus worked his way through some kind of elaborate salad that looked like it had been assembled by someone who took meal prep very seriously. "You look different," Marcus said, stabbing a cherry tomato with his fork. Ethan glanced up. "Different how?" "Less like you're about to collapse." "What changed?" "Flexible hours. Victoria approved it a couple weeks ago." Marcus's eyebrows went up. "Victoria Hale approved flex time? For you specifically?" "Don't sound so shocked." "I'm not shocked, I'm impressed. She doesn't usually make exceptions." "Yeah, well..." Ethan twirled pasta around his fork, not quite sure how to explain what had happened in that meeting. "I think she just got tired of me being a liability. Or she recognized you're worth accommodating." Marcus took a drink of what looked like green juice and grimaced slightly. "Either way, good for you, man. You earned it." Had he? Ethan still wasn't sure, but he was grateful for it, which felt more important than whether he deserved it. The following Saturday morning, Ethan took Ava grocery shopping. It was one of those mundane weekend tasks that somehow always took twice as long as it should, mostly because Ava insisted on examining every piece of produce like she was a quality control inspector. "This banana is too spotty," she announced, holding up a perfectly normal banana. "The spots mean it's ripe, baby." "But it looks sad." Ethan had no idea how a banana could look sad, but he swapped it for a different one anyway. Parenting was choosing your battles, and bananas weren't worth the fight. They were in the cereal aisle, Ava debating between two brands that were essentially identical except for the cartoon characters on the boxes, when Ethan heard a voice behind him that made his entire body go still. "Mr. Cole?" He turned around, and there was Victoria Hale, standing 3 feet away with a shopping basket in her hand. Victoria Hale. In a grocery store. On a Saturday morning. Wearing jeans. Ethan's brain temporarily short-circuited. He'd never seen her in anything except perfectly tailored business attire. The jeans were still expensive-looking, dark wash, perfectly fitted, and she wore them with a cream-colored sweater that probably cost more than his entire wardrobe, but it was casual, human, completely disconnected from the boardroom version of her that lived in his head. "Ms. Hale," Ethan managed. "Hi, I didn't I didn't know you shopped here." "I have to eat," Victoria said, and was that almost a smile? Just like everyone else. Ava, who had been completely absorbed in cereal selection, suddenly noticed they had company. She looked up at Victoria with open curiosity. "Who are you?" Ava asked, with the blunt directness only small children could get away with. "Ava," Ethan said quickly. "That's not polite." But Victoria didn't seem offended. She knelt down, so she was at Ava's eye level. "I'm Victoria. I work with your dad. Are you his boss?" "I am." Ava considered this with the seriousness of a Supreme Court justice. "Is he good at his job?" "Ava?" "He's very good at his job," Victoria said, and there was genuine warmth in her voice that Ethan had never heard before. "Your dad is one of the smartest people I work with." Ava beamed. "He helps me with my homework too. Sometimes he knows the answers and sometimes he has to look them up on his phone." "That sounds like a smart approach." Victoria glanced at the 2 cereal boxes Ava was still holding. "Having trouble deciding? This one has a tiger, but this one has a treasure map on the back." "The treasure map sounds more interesting." "That's what I was thinking." Ava grabbed the treasure map cereal with both hands, apparently considering the matter settled by external validation. Victoria stood back up, and when her eyes met Ethan's, something passed between them. An acknowledgement of the strangeness of this moment, maybe, Or just the simple recognition that they were both regular people existing in the world outside of office walls and professional obligations. "I didn't mean to interrupt your shopping," Victoria said. "You're not interrupting, we're just—" Ethan gestured vaguely at their half-full cart. "Doing the weekly thing." "Right." Victoria adjusted her basket, which Ethan noticed contained salad ingredients, a carton of eggs, and a bottle of wine. Saturday night alone, he guessed. Or maybe she had plans. He had no idea what Victoria Hale did with her personal time. "Do you have kids?" Ava asked suddenly. Victoria shook her head. "No, I don't." "Do you want kids?" "Ava, that's a personal question. It's okay." Victoria's expression softened in a way that made her look younger, less like the intimidating CEO and more like just a person navigating an unexpected conversation with a 5-year-old. "I haven't really thought about it much. I've been pretty focused on work." Ava nodded like this made perfect sense. "My dad works a lot too, but he still plays Candyland with me." "That sounds important." "It is. Do you know how to play Candyland?" "I don't think I've played it since I was your age." "You should play with us sometime." Ava turned to Ethan with bright eyes. "Right, Daddy? Victoria can come play Candyland." Ethan felt his face heat up. "I'm sure Victoria is very busy, baby." "I'd like that," Victoria said quietly. Ethan's brain stuttered again. "You would?" "If the invitation is genuine." She looked at him directly, and there was something in her expression he couldn't quite read. Curiosity? Loneliness? He had no idea. Yes, of course. The invitation is genuine." What was he doing? He was inviting his boss over to his tiny apartment to play board games with his 5-year-old daughter. This was insane. This violated about 17 different professional boundaries he was pretty sure existed. But Ava was already pulling out her toy phone from her jacket pocket, a plastic thing that didn't actually work but that she carried everywhere. "What's your number? I'll call you." Victoria actually smiled at that, a real genuine smile that transformed her entire face. "I think your dad can give me the details at work." "Okay, but don't forget, we play after dinner, 7 o'clock. "I'll remember." They said their goodbyes, and Victoria headed toward the checkout lanes while Ethan stood in the cereal aisle trying to process what had just happened. His 5-year-old daughter had just invited his billionaire CEO boss over for board games, and said boss had accepted. "She's nice," Ava said, dropping the treasure map cereal into the cart. "Can we get ice cream too?" "Yeah, baby, we can get ice cream." Ethan pushed the cart toward the frozen section, his mind already racing ahead to Monday morning and whether Victoria had actually been serious or if she'd just been polite. "You didn't really invite your boss over to your apartment." That wasn't how professional relationships worked. She'd probably forget all about it by Monday, and everything would go back to normal. Except Monday morning, Victoria stopped by his desk before 9 a.m. "Thursday evening," she said without preamble. "Would that work for Candyland?" Ethan looked up from his computer, startled. "You were serious about that?" "Your daughter extended an invitation. I'm accepting it." Victoria's expression was carefully neutral, but there was something underneath it, something that looked almost like nervousness. "Unless you'd prefer I didn't." "No, Thursday is fine. Great. Should I give you my address?" "Please." Ethan scribbled it on a sticky note, feeling like he was operating in some alternate reality where his boss came over for family game night. Victoria took the note, glanced at it once, then slipped it into her pocket. 7 o'clock, she confirmed. 7 o'clock. I'll be there. She walked away before Ethan could say anything else, leaving him staring at his computer screen without seeing any of the words on it. Marcus rolled his chair over from the adjacent desk. "Did Victoria Hale just get your home address?" Ava invited her over to play board games. "Your 5-year-old invited the CEO over for board games." "Apparently." Marcus let out a low whistle. "That's either the boldest career move I've ever seen or the strangest. I can't decide which." "It wasn't a career move. It was my daughter being friendly to someone she met in a grocery store." "Still, Victoria Hale doesn't do social calls." "Maybe she does, and we just don't know about it." But even as Ethan said it, he suspected Marcus was right. Victoria struck him as someone who kept her personal and professional lives in completely separate compartments, never allowing them to touch, which made Thursday evening even stranger. The next 3 days passed in a blur of work and preparation. Ethan deep cleaned the apartment Wednesday night after Ava went to bed, suddenly hyper-aware of how small and shabby the space probably looked compared to wherever Victoria lived. He picked up Ava's toys, washed the dishes twice, even vacuumed the couch cushions. By Thursday morning, the place looked better than it had in months, and Ethan felt ridiculous for caring so much about impressing someone who'd already seen him at his lowest. Ava, on the other hand, was thrilled. She spent Thursday afternoon drawing a welcome sign for Victoria, complete with stick figures and what might have been flowers or possibly explosions. It was hard to tell. "Should I wear my fancy dress?" Ava asked, holding up a purple dress with tulle that she usually reserved for birthday parties. "You don't need to get fancy, baby. It's just dinner and games." "But Victoria is fancy." "Victoria is coming as a friend, not as my boss. You can wear whatever you want." Ava considered this, then opted for her dinosaur shirt and leggings. "Barney wants to meet her too." "I'm sure Barney will be on his best behavior." At 6:30, Ethan started making dinner. Nothing elaborate, just spaghetti and meatballs because it was Ava's favorite, and he could make it without burning anything. The apartment filled with the smell of garlic and tomato sauce, and Ava set the table with exaggerated care, making sure all the forks were perfectly aligned. The knock on the door came at exactly 7 p.m. Ethan wiped his hands on a dish towel and opened the door, and there was Victoria Hale standing in the hallway of his third-floor apartment building, holding a bottle of wine and looking somehow both perfectly put together and slightly uncertain. She dressed down, or what counted as dressing down for her. Dark jeans again, a soft gray sweater, minimal jewelry. Her hair was down instead of pulled back, falling in dark waves around her shoulders. She looked different, softer, more accessible. "Hi," Ethan said, stepping aside to let her in. "Come in. Thanks for coming." "Thank you for having me." Victoria stepped inside, her eyes taking in the small space with what Ethan hoped was curiosity rather than judgment. "I brought wine. I wasn't sure if—" "Victoria!" Ava came running from the living room, waving her welcome sign. "Look what I made you!" Victoria knelt down again. Apparently that was just something she did now, and examined the sign with genuine interest. "This is beautiful. Are these flowers?" "They're stars. And that's you, and that's my dad, and that's me, and that's Barney." "Who's Barney?" Ava ran back to the living room and returned with the purple T-Rex clutched in her arms. "This is Barney. He's a Tyrannosaurus Rex." "It's nice to meet you, Barney." Victoria said it completely seriously, like she regularly introduced herself to stuffed dinosaurs. Ethan felt something shift in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature in the apartment. "Dinner's almost ready," he said. "Can I take your jacket?" Victoria handed him her coat, cashmere, expensive, probably worth more than his monthly grocery budget, and Ethan hung it carefully by the door. She followed him into the small kitchen where the pot of spaghetti was bubbling on the stove. "Something smells good," she said. "Just spaghetti and meatballs. Nothing fancy. I haven't had homemade spaghetti in years." There was something in the way she said it, a hint of loneliness, maybe, that made Ethan pause. "You're welcome to stay for dinner. I mean, I assumed you would, but I should have actually asked. I'd like that." They ate at the small table in the kitchen, Ava chattering between bites about school and her friends, and the treasure map on the back of her cereal box. Victoria listened with what seemed like genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at Ava's stories about playground drama. Ethan watched them interact and felt something strange happening. The walls he'd built between his work life and his home life, the careful separation he'd maintained to keep from being seen as weak or unprofessional, were crumbling, and instead of feeling exposed, he felt relief. After dinner, they cleared the dishes together. Victoria insisted on helping despite Ethan's protests, and they ended up side by side at the sink, him washing and her drying with a dish towel that had seen better days. "Your daughter is wonderful," Victoria said quietly, so Ava wouldn't hear from where she was setting up Candyland in the living room. "She's my whole world." "I can see that." Victoria set a dried plate on the counter. "It must be hard, doing this alone." "Some days are harder than others." Ethan handed her another plate. "But she makes it worth it." "You're a good father." The compliment caught him off guard. "You don't know that. You've known us for an hour." "I've watched you for months, the way you talk about her, the way you prioritize her even when it costs you professionally. That tells me everything I need to know." Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just kept washing dishes while something warm and unfamiliar settled in his chest. They finished the dishes and joined Ava in the living room, where the Candyland board was set up on the coffee table. Ava had already claimed the blue gingerbread man piece and assigned Victoria the red one. "Daddy always gets yellow," Ava explained, "because it matches his work folder." "That's very organized thinking," Victoria said, accepting the red piece. They played 3 rounds of Candyland, which was exactly as chaotic as Ethan expected. Ava won the first game, Ethan won the second, and Victoria won the third, though Ethan suspected she might have drawn the plumpy card on purpose to make Ava laugh. By 8:30, Ava was yawning between turns, her earlier excitement giving way to exhaustion. "Bedtime, baby," Ethan said gently, "but Victoria just got here." "Victoria can come back another time. Right now, you need sleep." Ava looked at Victoria with pleading eyes. "Will you come back?" "If your dad invites me, I'd like that." "He invites you, don't you, Daddy?" Ethan met Victoria's eyes over his daughter's head, and something passed between them, an understanding, an acknowledgement of whatever this was becoming. "I do," he said softly. Ava hugged Victoria goodnight, just wrapped her small arms around Victoria's legs and squeezed, and Victoria looked momentarily startled before carefully hugging her back. "Good night, Ava. Thank you for inviting me." "Good night, Victoria." Ethan carried Ava to her bedroom for the usual bedtime routine. Pajamas, teeth brushing, 3 stories instead of the usual 2 because she was still wound up from having a guest. By the time she finally fell asleep, it was almost 9. When Ethan came back out to the living room, Victoria was still there, standing by the window looking out at the street below. She turned when she heard him. "Sorry that took so long," Ethan said. "She gets chatty at bedtime." "Don't apologize. I'm the one who should apologize for staying so late." "You're not staying too late. Would you like some of that wine you brought? I didn't want to open it during dinner with Ava around, but I'd like that." Ethan opened the bottle, something French that he had no idea how to pronounce, and poured 2 glasses. They sat on the couch, a careful distance between them, the remnants of Candyland still spread out on the coffee table. "Thank you for tonight," Victoria said, holding her wine glass but not drinking yet. "I can't remember the last time I spent an evening just being normal." "This is normal for you?" "No, that's the point." She finally took a sip of wine, then set the glass down on the coffee table. "My life is meetings and deals and constant performance. I'm always on, always being Victoria Hale, CEO. Tonight I got to just be a person who plays board games and eats spaghetti." "You can be that person more often, if you want." "Can I?" Victoria looked at him directly, and her expression was more vulnerable than he'd ever seen it. "I'm not sure I remember how." Ethan thought about all the walls he'd built around himself, too. All the ways he'd learned to perform competence and stability while barely holding it together underneath. Maybe they weren't so different after all. "I think you're doing fine," he said quietly. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easier than Ethan would have thought possible. Victoria told him about growing up in Boston, about starting her company in her early 20s with nothing but a business plan and borrowed capital. Ethan told her about Ava's mother leaving, about the terrifying early days of single parenthood when he had no idea what he was doing. It was almost 10:30 when Victoria finally stood to leave. "I should go," she said, though she didn't sound particularly eager to do so. "Early meeting tomorrow." "Right, of course." Ethan walked her to the door, helping her into her expensive coat. "Thanks again for coming. Ava's going to talk about this for weeks." "It was my pleasure. Really." They stood in the doorway, close enough that Ethan could smell her perfume, something subtle and elegant that suited her perfectly. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Ethan," Victoria said softly, using his first name for the first time outside of work, "would it be completely inappropriate if I asked to do this again?" "Probably," Ethan admitted. "But I'd like that anyway." She smiled, that same genuine smile from the grocery store that made her look like a completely different person. "Good, because I would too." "Next Thursday?" "I'll be here." Victoria left, and Ethan stood in his doorway listening to her footsteps recede down the hallway. When he finally closed the door and turned back to his empty living room, the space felt different somehow. Warmer. Less lonely. He cleaned up the Candyland pieces and washed the wine glasses, his mind replaying the evening in fragments. Victoria kneeling to talk to Ava. Victoria laughing at something silly his daughter said. Victoria sitting on his couch drinking wine and talking about her life like they were friends instead of employer and employee. His phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. He opened it. Thank you for tonight. I forgot what it felt like to be welcome somewhere. V. Ethan stared at the message for a long moment, then saved her number in his contacts. You're welcome here anytime, he typed back. Ava already asked if you're coming next week. The response came quickly. Tell her yes. Ethan smiled and set his phone down, then went to check on Ava one more time before bed. She was sprawled across her mattress, one arm wrapped around Barney, completely at peace. He pulled her blanket up over her shoulders and kissed her forehead gently. We had a good night, baby girl, he whispered, even though she was sound asleep. I think we might have made a friend. The following week at work, nothing changed and everything changed. Professionally, Victoria was still Victoria, precise, demanding, focused on results. But there were small moments now, tiny shifts that only Ethan seemed to notice. The way she paused by his desk sometimes to ask how Ava was doing. The way she smiled slightly when he mentioned something his daughter had said. The way she signed off emails with just V instead of her full name. Thursday evening came again, and Victoria showed up at 7 p.m. with a coloring book and a set of expensive colored pencils for Ava. I thought she might like these, Victoria said, handing the gift to Ava, who accepted it with wide eyes. These are fancy, Ava said, examining the pencils with appropriate reverence. Thank you. They fell into an easy routine. Dinner, Ethan tried to vary it, but Ava kept requesting spaghetti, and Victoria never complained. Then games or coloring or sometimes just talking while Ava played with her toys. Then bedtime for Ava and wine for the adults. The third Thursday, as they sat on the couch after Ava had gone to sleep, Victoria asked him about the Riverside project. It's going well, Ethan said. They're happy with the initial implementation. We're on track for phase 2 next month. I know, I've been reading your reports. Then why ask? Because your reports are professional updates. I wanted to know how you feel about it. Ethan considered the question. Proud, I guess? It's the first major project I've managed from start to finish in years. Feels good to know I can still do this. You never couldn't do this, Ethan. You just needed support. Maybe. He took a sip of wine. Or maybe I needed someone to believe I was worth supporting. Victoria turned to look at him, her expression serious. I should have seen what you were dealing with earlier. I should have asked sooner. You asked when it mattered. Still, I spent so long seeing the pattern without seeing the person. That was wrong. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the distant sounds of the city filtering through the window. Can I ask you something? Ethan said. Of course. Why are you really here? Every Thursday, playing board games and eating spaghetti with a 5-year-old? This isn't, you're Victoria Hale. You could be anywhere doing anything. Victoria set down her wine glass and folded her hands in her lap. Because for 3 hours every Thursday, I get to be around people who actually like me. Not Victoria Hale, the CEO. Not the youngest billionaire in the industry. Just me. Your daughter doesn't care about my net worth or my business strategy. She cares about whether I'm nice to Barney and whether I'll help her color inside the lines. And what about me? Ethan asked quietly. Why do you come for me? Victoria met his eyes, and there was something raw in her expression. Because you see me too. The same way I finally started seeing you. We're both people trying to be enough for the worlds we're responsible for. And sometimes it's nice to stop pretending for a little while. Ethan's heart was beating faster than normal. They were sitting close enough now that he could see the flecks of gray in her blue eyes, could count the tiny stress lines at the corners of her mouth that her makeup usually hid. Victoria, I should go, she said abruptly, standing up. It's late. Ethan stood too, confused by the sudden shift. Did I say something wrong? No, you said something very right, and that scares me. She grabbed her coat from the hook by the door, not meeting his eyes. I'll see you at work tomorrow. Victoria, wait. She paused with her hand on the door handle, her back to him. This is already complicated, Ethan. I'm your boss. You're my employee. We're crossing lines that probably shouldn't be crossed. I know. And I don't know how to stop. The admission hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable and terrifying. "Maybe we don't have to stop," Ethan said softly. "Maybe we just have to be careful." Victoria turned back to face him, and the look in her eyes was something Ethan couldn't quite name. Hope? Fear? A mixture of both? "I'll see you next Thursday," she said finally. Next Thursday. She left, and Ethan stood in his doorway for the second time in 3 weeks, watching her go and wondering what exactly they were building between them. Whatever it was, it felt important and fragile and worth protecting. The following Monday, Ethan arrived at his desk to find a coffee waiting for him. Not the break room coffee that tasted like it had been filtered through old socks. Real coffee from the expensive place 2 blocks over that he only went to on special occasions because a single cup cost nearly $8. It sat next to his keyboard in a to-go cup with his name written on the side in neat handwriting he recognized immediately. There was no note, no explanation, just the coffee. Ethan picked it up, still warm, and took a sip. Perfect. She'd somehow remembered how he took it, 2 creams, 1 sugar, from that morning weeks ago when they'd gone over the Riverside presentation together. Marcus rolled his chair over, eyeing the fancy cup. "Did you win the lottery or something?" "Something like that." "That's from Coastal Brew. You never get Coastal Brew." "Someone left it for me." Marcus's eyes went wide. "Victoria Hale left you an $8 coffee." "I didn't say it was from her." "You didn't have to. No one else around here would drop that kind of money on a coworker." Marcus lowered his voice. "What exactly is going on between you two?" "Nothing. She's been coming over on Thursdays for dinner with Ava." "Your boss comes to your apartment for family dinner." "When you say it like that, it sounds weird." "Because it is weird. In a good way, maybe, but definitely weird." Marcus studied him for a moment. "You like her." It wasn't a question. Ethan took another sip of coffee, buying time. Did he like Victoria? The question felt too simple for what was actually happening. She was his boss. She was brilliant and intimidating and lived in a completely different world than he did. But she also knelt down to talk to his daughter. She played Candyland without complaint. She sat on his worn-out couch drinking wine and talking about her life like they were equals. "It's complicated," Ethan finally said. "The best things usually are." Marcus rolled back to his own desk. "Just be careful, man. Office romances are tricky enough without throwing a CEO into the mix." Ethan wanted to argue that it wasn't a romance, but the word stuck in his throat. Because what was it, exactly? Friendship seemed too casual, professional relationship too formal. They existed in some undefined space between categories, and Ethan had no idea what to call it. The coffee became a pattern. Every Monday morning, a cup from Coastal Brew appeared on his desk. Victoria never mentioned it, never acknowledged the gesture, but Ethan knew. And somehow, the fact that she did it quietly, without fanfare or expectation of gratitude, made it mean more. The second week, he found something else. A sticky note on his monitor, written in that same neat handwriting. The Henderson analysis was excellent. Well done. Ethan had stayed up until midnight finishing that analysis, working after Ava went to bed because the data was complex and required focus he couldn't manage during the day. He'd submitted it at 1 a.m., expecting Victoria wouldn't even look at it until the following afternoon. But she had looked at it, and she'd left him a note. He carefully peeled the sticky note off his monitor and tucked it into his wallet, not quite ready to examine why that felt important. Thursday evening came again, and this time when Victoria arrived, she brought something for Ethan too. A book. A thriller he'd mentioned weeks ago during one of their late-night conversations, something he'd wanted to read but hadn't gotten around to buying. "I saw it at the bookstore," Victoria said, handing it to him almost shyly. "Thought you might still want it." "You remembered that?" "I remember most things you tell me." Ava tugged on Victoria's sleeve, demanding attention. "Can we make cookies tonight?" "Daddy said we could if you wanted to." Victoria looked at Ethan with raised eyebrows. "Did he?" "I may have promised cookies," Ethan admitted, "but I'll understand if you'd rather not spend your evening covered in flour." "I haven't made cookies since I was a kid." "It's easy." Ava grabbed Victoria's hand. "Come on, I'll show you." They spent the next hour in Ethan's tiny kitchen, making chocolate chip cookies from scratch. Ava insisted on doing most of the mixing herself, which resulted in flour on every available surface and chocolate chips mysteriously disappearing before they made it into the dough. Victoria gamely rolled up her sleeves and helped, laughing when Ava accidentally flung batter onto her sweater. "I'm so sorry," Ethan said, grabbing a dish towel. "Ava, you have to be more careful." "It's fine." Victoria wiped at the batter with her hand, completely unconcerned. "It'll wash out." That sweater probably cost more than my rent." "It's just a sweater, Ethan." But the way she said it, so casual, like designer clothes and expensive things were meaningless compared to the moment they were having, did something to Ethan's chest. This woman, who could buy anything she wanted, who lived in a world of luxury he could barely imagine, was standing in his kitchen with flour in her hair and batter on her sweater, helping his daughter make cookies. When the first batch came out of the oven, Ava insisted they all try one immediately, even though they were too hot to touch comfortably. They burned their fingers and their tongues and declared them the best cookies ever made. Later, after Ava had gone to bed with a stomachache from eating too many cookies, Ethan and Victoria sat on the couch with their usual glasses of wine. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly, "for the coffee and the notes and the book. You don't have to do those things." I know I don't have to. I want to." Victoria set her wine glass down and turned to face him more fully. "You carry so much, Ethan. I see it every day at work. The way you manage the Riverside account while also fielding calls from Ava's school. The way you stay late to make up time but never complain about it. You don't ask for help. You don't expect recognition. You just do what needs to be done. That's just being a parent. It's more than that. And I wanted you to know that I see it. I see you." Those 3 words landed with unexpected weight. I see you. The same thing he'd thought about her, that she finally saw him as more than just an employee. She was saying back to him now. "I see you too," Ethan said softly. "Not Victoria Hale, CEO, just Victoria. The person who plays board games and makes cookies and laughs at my daughter's terrible jokes. They're not terrible jokes, they're very sophisticated humor. Last week she asked why the cookie went to the doctor. The answer was because it felt crumbly. That's objectively terrible." Victoria smiled. "Okay, maybe a little terrible, but she commits to the delivery." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the space between them on the couch feeling smaller than usual. Ethan was acutely aware of how close they were sitting, close enough that if he shifted just slightly, their shoulders would touch. "Can I tell you something?" Victoria asked, her voice quieter now. "Of course. I was wrong. About you. About what I thought was happening those first few months." She looked down at her hands, wrapped around the wine glass. "I saw the late arrivals and the missed meetings, and I made assumptions. I thought you were taking advantage, being careless with a job other people would kill for. I never stopped to consider that maybe you were fighting just to survive each day. You didn't know. I should have asked. Before I judged. Before I let HR start building a case for termination." She looked up at him, and her eyes were bright with something that might have been regret. "I almost fired you, Ethan. I was this close to letting you go before you even had a chance to explain. But you didn't." "No, but I came close enough that it scares me. What if I had? What if I'd made that call and lost?" She stopped, seeming to catch herself. "Lost what?" Ethan prompted gently. Victoria took a shaky breath. "This. All of this, these Thursday evenings, Ava's hugs, the way your apartment smells like coffee in the morning and cookies at night. The feeling of being somewhere I actually belong instead of just performing belonging." She set down her wine glass with trembling hands. "I would have lost the first real thing I've had in years, and I wouldn't have even known what I was giving up." Ethan's heart was pounding now, loud enough he was sure she could hear it. "Victoria, I know this is complicated. I know all the reasons this shouldn't be happening, but I can't." She pressed her hands together, trying to steady them. "I don't know how to go back to before. To seeing you as just another employee, to pretending Thursday nights don't matter. Then don't." "Don't what?" "Don't go back. Don't pretend." Ethan shifted closer, closing the already small distance between them. "I don't want to go back either." Victoria's breath caught. They were close enough now that Ethan could see the rapid pulse at her throat. could smell her perfume mixing with the lingering scent of chocolate chip cookies. "This could get messy," she whispered. "Probably. People will talk. Let them. I could lose my professional credibility. You could lose your job." "We'll be careful." Victoria closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, there was a vulnerability there that Ethan had never seen before. "I'm scared." Me too. "I don't know how to do this. Relationships, normal things. I've spent so long being the CEO that I forgot how to just be a person who wants something for herself." "Then we'll figure it out together." Ethan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. Her fingers were cold despite the warmth of the apartment. No expectations, no pressure, just this. Whatever this is. Victoria's fingers tightened around his. "What if I'm terrible at it?" "At what?" "Being someone's—" She hesitated, seeming to struggle with the word. "Being someone's person. You're already Ava's favorite person after me. That's a pretty good start." Ava is 5. She thinks dinosaurs are historically accurate based on cartoons. Ava is also an excellent judge of character. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "She saw something in you that first day at the grocery store. Before I did. Before you did, maybe. She saw someone kind. I'm not always kind. I'm demanding and perfectionist, and I've made people cry in board meetings. Did they deserve it? Usually? Then that's not unkind. That's having standards." Ethan smiled. "You're allowed to be both, you know, the brilliant CEO and the person who plays Candyland. They're not mutually exclusive." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching his face like she was looking for something. "How did you get so wise?" "Single parenthood. It either breaks you or teaches you what actually matters." "And what actually matters? This. Right here, being seen, being known, showing up for the people who show up for you." Ethan lifted their joined hands slightly. "You showed up for me, Victoria, when I needed it most. You saw past the mess and the failures and decided I was worth saving. That matters more than you know. You saved yourself. I just stopped standing in your way. You gave me the tools to save myself. There's a difference." Victoria's eyes were bright now, tears threatening to spill over. "I don't cry," she said, her voice thick. "Okay. I'm serious. I don't do this." "That's fine." "So why do I feel like I'm about to—" A single tear escaped, tracking down her cheek. Ethan reached up with his free hand and gently wiped it away with his thumb. "Because you're human, Victoria, and humans cry sometimes, even billionaire CEOs." She laughed, a watery, slightly broken sound. "This is ridiculous. I'm sitting on your couch crying about feelings like a teenager. Welcome to being a regular person. It's uncomfortable and messy and completely worth it." Victoria leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "I like it here," she whispered. "In your apartment with your daughter and your terrible jokes and your hand-me-down furniture. I like being regular. You could never be regular, but you can be yourself. That's better." They sat like that for a while, hands clasped, Ethan's thumb still resting against her cheek. The city noise filtered in through the windows, distant sirens, car horns, the sounds of life happening all around them. But inside this small apartment, there was just the two of them and the quiet acknowledgement of something shifting into place. Eventually, Victoria pulled back slightly, wiping at her eyes. "I should go. It's late, and we both have work tomorrow." "Okay." But neither of them moved. "Ethan? Yeah? Can I ask you something that might be completely inappropriate? You've been coming to my apartment for weeks and playing board games with my 5-year-old. I think we're past inappropriate." Victoria smiled despite the tears. "Fair point." She took a breath. "Would it be okay if I hugged you? Not in a professional way, not in a polite way, just a real hug." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "Yeah, that would be okay." She moved into his arms carefully, like she was afraid of breaking something. But once she was there, she held on tight, her face pressed against his shoulder, her arms wrapped around him with surprising strength. Ethan held her back just as tightly, one hand in her hair, feeling her breathe against him. They stayed like that for longer than a casual hug, long enough that Ethan could feel Victoria's heartbeat slowing, her breathing evening out. Long enough that the embrace became something more than comfort. It became acknowledgement. recognition. Two people who'd been fighting their own battles alone finally finding someone who understood. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria's makeup was smudged and her hair was messy, and she looked more beautiful than Ethan had ever seen her. "Same time next week?" she asked, her voice still a little rough. "I'll be here." "So will I." She gathered her things, coat, purse, the empty wine glass she always insisted on washing herself. At the door, she turned back one more time. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For letting me be messy. No one ever lets me be messy." "You can be as messy as you want here. This is a judgment-free zone." Victoria smiled, that genuine smile that transformed her entire face. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Victoria." After she left, Ethan cleaned up the kitchen, washing the cookie sheets and putting away the leftover dough. His mind kept replaying the evening, the way she'd held his hand, the way she'd cried, the way she'd held on to him like he was an anchor in a storm. Something had changed tonight, something fundamental. They'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, acknowledged feelings that couldn't be unacknowledged. And Ethan wasn't scared. He should be. This was his boss. His career was in her hands. If this went wrong, it could destroy everything he'd worked so hard to build. But for the first time in years, Ethan felt like he was building towards something instead of just trying to prevent collapse. And that feeling was worth the risk. The next morning, there was another coffee on his desk. But this time, there was also a note. "Thank you for last night, for seeing me, for letting me be human. VPS. Ava left her dinosaur coloring book at my place. I'll bring it Thursday. Unless you need it sooner, in which case I can drop it by your desk, though that might raise questions." Ethan smiled and pulled out his phone. "Ava can survive without it until Thursday. Besides, gives you an excuse to come back." The response came within minutes. "I don't need an excuse, Ethan. I want to be there." Over the following weeks, small gifts appeared with increasing frequency. A children's book that Victoria thought Ava would like, left on Ethan's desk with a sticky note. A pack of Ava's favorite fruit snacks, tucked into his laptop bag somehow when he wasn't looking. A small stuffed triceratops to keep Barney company, delivered via Rebecca with a completely straight face. "Ms. Hale asked me to give this to you," Rebecca said, handing over the toy dinosaur. "She said your daughter would know what it's for." "Thank you, Rebecca." Rebecca lingered for a moment, then lowered her voice. "For what it's worth, I've worked for Victoria for 5 years. I've never seen her this happy." Ethan looked up, surprised. "She seems happy?" "She smiles at her desk now, real smiles, not professional ones. She asks about people's families. Last week she actually laughed at someone's joke in a meeting." Rebecca raised her eyebrows significantly. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. We like this version of her." After Rebecca left, Ethan sat at his desk holding a stuffed triceratops and trying to process the fact that Victoria Hale's assistant had essentially just given her blessing to whatever was happening between them. Thursday night, Ava was beside herself with excitement over the new dinosaur. "What's his name?" Victoria asked, kneeling down to Ava's level like always. "Stuart," Ava declared immediately, "because he looks like a Stuart." "That's very logical. Barney and Stuart are best friends. They fight crime together." "What kind of crime do dinosaurs fight?" "Mostly meteor crimes, and sometimes people who don't share their cookies." Victoria laughed, the real laugh that Rebecca had mentioned, unguarded and genuine. "Those are serious crimes indeed." Dinner that night was different. There was an ease between them now, a comfort that hadn't existed before. Victoria helped Ava with her mac and cheese without being asked, cutting it into smaller pieces when it was too hot. Ethan caught her eye across the table, and she smiled at him with such warmth that his chest ached. After Ava went to bed, they settled into their usual spots on the couch, but this time Victoria sat closer. Close enough that their shoulders touched. Close enough that when Ethan shifted, his hand naturally fell next to hers on the cushion between them. "I have something for you," Victoria said, pulling a small envelope from her purse. "But I'm nervous about giving it to you." "Why nervous?" "Because it might be too much. It might cross a line." "We've already crossed most of the lines, Victoria." She smiled slightly. "True." She handed him the envelope. "Don't open it until I leave." "That's very mysterious." "Promise me." "Okay, I promise." "Okay, I..." They spent the rest of the evening talking about work, about Ava, About nothing in particular. But the envelope sat on the coffee table between them, like a secret waiting to be revealed. When Victoria finally left around 10, she paused at the door. "Remember, don't open it until I'm gone." "I remember." She hesitated, then leaned up and kissed his cheek, quick and soft, barely more than a brush of lips against skin. Then she was gone before Ethan could respond, the door closing behind her with a soft click. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, his hand coming up to touch the spot where she'd kissed him. His skin was tingling. Then he remembered the envelope. He picked it up from the coffee table and carefully opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper with an address written in Victoria's handwriting, along with a date and time. This coming Saturday, 2 p.m. Below the address, a note. "I want you to meet someone important to me. If you're comfortable bringing Ava, I'd like her to come too. No pressure. But I hope you'll say yes." Ethan read the note 3 times, his heart doing complicated things in his chest. She wanted him to meet someone important to her. She wanted Ava there too. This was real. Whatever was building between them, it was real enough that Victoria wanted to integrate their lives beyond Thursday evenings in his apartment. Ethan pulled out his phone. "Yes, we'll be there." The response came back almost immediately, like she'd been waiting. "I was hoping you'd say that. Wear something comfortable. And tell Ava to bring Barney and Stuart." Should I be nervous? Maybe a little, but in a good way. Saturday afternoon arrived with clear skies and unseasonable warmth. Ethan dressed Ava in her favorite dress, the purple one with tulle, and grabbed both dinosaurs at her insistence. The address Victoria had given him led to a neighborhood Ethan had driven through before but never stopped in. Large houses with manicured lawns, the kind of area where people had gardeners and luxury cars. He pulled up to the specified house and double-checked the address. This couldn't be right. The house was beautiful, but not ostentatious, a craftsman-style home with a wide porch and flower boxes in the windows. It looked warm, lived in, nothing like the cold modern mansion he'd imagined Victoria living in. Before he could second-guess himself, the front door opened and Victoria appeared. She was wearing jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hair down around her shoulders. She looked nervous and excited and completely unlike the CEO he saw at work. "You came," she said, smiling as she walked down the porch steps to meet them. "We promised, didn't we?" Ethan helped Ava out of the car. "Whose house is this?" "Come inside. I'll show you." Victoria led them up the porch steps and through the front door into a house that smelled like something baking and fresh flowers. The interior was cozy, hardwood floors, comfortable furniture, family photos on the walls. An older woman appeared from what looked like the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She was maybe 60, with gray hair and kind eyes, and a smile that reminded Ethan of Victoria's real smile. "Mom," Victoria said, and Ethan felt his entire world tilt slightly. "This is Ethan Cole and his daughter Ava." "Ethan, Ava, this is my mother, Patricia." Victoria's mother stepped forward, her smile widening. "I've heard so much about both of you. Victoria talks about your Thursday evenings all the time." Ethan was still processing the fact that Victoria had brought him to meet her mother. Her mother. This was several steps beyond casual. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Patricia, please. None of that formal stuff." She knelt down to Ava's level. "And you must be Ava. Victoria tells me you're an expert on dinosaurs." Ava, never shy, immediately launched into an explanation of Barney and Stuart's crime-fighting adventures. Patricia listened with the same genuine interest Victoria always showed, asking questions and nodding seriously at Ava's answers. Victoria touched Ethan's elbow gently. "Can we talk for a second? Mom will keep Ava entertained." She led him to a small study off the main hallway, closing the door behind them. "I'm sorry for springing this on you," Victoria said immediately. "I should have explained more in the note, but I was afraid if I told you it was my mother, you'd think it was too much too soon." "It is too much too soon," Ethan said, but he was smiling. "But I'm here anyway. My mother is the only person I stay close to, the only family I have left. I wanted her to meet you, to meet Ava. Because you're—" She stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "You're important to me, both of you." "We're important to you," Ethan repeated softly. "Yes." "Important enough to bring home to meet your mother." "Yes." Ethan stepped closer, reaching out to take her hand. For the record, you're important to me too. And Ava talks about you constantly. Last night she asked if you could be her bonus mom. Victoria's eyes went wide. She what? She said you're not her real mom because she had one of those who left, but maybe you could be her bonus mom who stays. Ethan's throat was tight. I told her I didn't know, but I'd ask you? What did you tell her I'd say? I told her I thought you'd say yes, if she wanted you to be. Victoria's eyes were bright with tears again. I'm doing that thing where I cry, she whispered. I know, it's okay. I don't want to do this in front of my mother. She'll get ideas. I think she already has ideas, Victoria. Victoria laughed wetly and wiped at her eyes. Probably. She's been telling me for years I work too much, that I need to let people in. She squeezed Ethan's hand. I'm glad I let you in. Me too. They stood there for a moment, holding hands in Patricia's study, before returning to the living room where Ava was showing Patricia how Barney and Stuart fought crime together using very elaborate sound effects. The afternoon unfolded with surprising ease. Patricia served cookies she'd baked, chocolate chip, Ava's favorite, and they all sat in the living room while Ava alternated between performing dinosaur shows and asking Patricia questions about everything from her garden to what Victoria was like as a kid. She was very serious, Patricia told Ava conspiratorially, always reading big books and making business plans for pretend companies. What kind of companies? Ava asked. Oh, everything. She made a whole plan for a lemonade stand when she was 7 that included profit projections and market analysis. I was an ambitious child, Victoria said, her cheeks slightly pink. You were brilliant, Patricia corrected gently. You still are. But I'm glad you're learning there's more to life than business plans. She looked at Ethan meaningfully. Later, while Ava was distracted with the cookies, Patricia pulled Ethan aside. I want to thank you, she said quietly, for whatever you've done to make my daughter smile again. I haven't done anything. That's all her. No, it's not. I've watched Victoria build walls around herself for 15 years, protecting herself, keeping everyone at a distance because she thought that's what success required. Patricia's eyes were warm, but the way she talks about you and Ava, the way she lights up, I haven't seen that since she was young, before she decided she had to be perfect all the time. She's still pretty perfect, Ethan said. She's human, and she's finally letting herself be human again. That's because of you. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. As they were leaving, Ava hugged Patricia goodbye with the same enthusiasm she usually reserved for Victoria. Can we come back? She asked. Anytime you want, sweetheart, Patricia said, hugging her back. You're always welcome here. In the car, Ava chattered about Patricia's house and the cookies and how nice it was to have a grandma figure since her real grandparents lived far away. Ethan drove in comfortable silence, processing everything that had happened. His phone buzzed at a red light. Thank you for today. My mother already texted to say she loves you both. Ethan smiled and typed back one-handed. We love her too. And for the record, Ava's official answer about the bonus mom thing is yes, if the offer still stands. The response took longer this time. Long enough that Ethan had pulled into his apartment parking lot before his phone buzzed again. The offer stands. Tell her yes. And tell her I said I love her too. Ethan looked at that message for a long time, at those 3 words that changed everything. I love her too. Not just acknowledgement, not just fondness. Love. That night, after Ava was in bed, Ethan sat on his couch with a glass of wine and thought about how much had changed in just a few months. From barely holding his life together to this, to someone who saw him, who valued him, who loved his daughter and wanted to be part of their lives. To someone who left coffee on his desk and notes on his monitor and who trusted him enough to bring him home to meet her mother. The struggles hadn't disappeared. Money was still tight. Work was still demanding. Single parenthood was still exhausting. But for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel alone in it. And that made all the difference. The weeks that followed Patricia's house blurred together in a way that felt both impossibly fast and perfectly slow. Ethan found himself existing in 2 overlapping worlds. The professional sphere where Victoria was still his boss, still demanding and precise and brilliant, and the private sphere where she was becoming something he didn't quite have a name for yet. Girlfriend felt too casual, partner too formal. She was Victoria, and she was becoming essential, and that was enough for now. The Thursday dinners continued, but they expanded beyond just the three of them. Sometimes Patricia joined, bringing homemade pies and stories about Victoria's childhood that made Victoria groan and Ava laugh. Sometimes it was just quiet evenings where they cooked together, and Ava fell asleep on the couch between them, her head on Victoria's lap, while they watched movies she'd already seen 100 times. At work, they maintained careful professionalism. No lingering looks across conference rooms. No private conversations that couldn't be explained as project-related. But Ethan would find sticky notes with inside jokes only they understood, small gifts that acknowledged the person behind the employee. One Monday morning in early December, Ethan arrived to find not just coffee on his desk, but a children's book. The cover showed a little girl and a dinosaur going on adventures together. Inside the front cover, Victoria had written in her neat handwriting, "For Ava," though I suspect you'll end up reading it to her 100 times. V. Marcus leaned over from his desk, eyeing the book. "She's really committed to this whole secret admirer thing, huh?" "It's not a secret anymore. Half the office probably knows." "Half the office definitely knows, but no one's saying anything because the work is still getting done, and Victoria seems happy." Marcus lowered his voice. "You are being careful, though, right?" "As careful as we can be." "That's not exactly reassuring." Ethan understood the concern. Office relationships were complicated enough without adding the power dynamics of CEO and employee. If this went wrong, it wouldn't just be his heart on the line. It would be his career, his ability to provide for Ava, everything he'd worked so hard to stabilize. But when he looked at Victoria across the conference room during meetings, when she smiled at something he said or defended his ideas to skeptical clients, Ethan couldn't bring himself to regret the risk. The Riverside account was thriving. The implementation had gone smoothly, and they were already in talks about expanding the partnership. During a presentation to the board in mid-December, Victoria publicly credited Ethan's work as instrumental to the success. "Mr. Cole's analysis and strategic planning were the foundation of this partnership," she said, standing at the head of the conference table with charts projected behind her. "His dedication to excellence, even under challenging circumstances, exemplifies the kind of employee we want to retain and promote." Ethan felt heat creep up his neck as the board members turned to look at him with renewed interest. After the meeting, the CFO pulled him aside. "Victoria rarely gives that kind of public recognition," he said. "You've clearly impressed her. Keep up the excellent work." Later that evening, after Ava was asleep and Victoria had come over for their usual Thursday dinner, Ethan mentioned the board meeting. "You didn't have to do that," he said, pouring wine for both of them. "The public credit, I mean." "Yes, I did. You earned it." Victoria accepted the glass and settled into what had become her usual spot on the couch, the corner closest to the window, where the city lights filtered through. "I'm not going to pretend you didn't carry that project just because people might speculate about our relationship. People are definitely speculating. Let them. The work speaks for itself." She took a sip of wine, then added quietly, "Besides, I'm tired of hiding how I feel about you." Ethan's heart stuttered. They danced around the feelings for weeks now, acknowledged them in private, shown them through actions, but neither had said the actual words yet. "How do you feel about me?" he asked, settling next to her. Victoria set down her wine glass and turned to face him fully. "Terrified, mostly. You've completely disrupted every system I had in place to protect myself." "That doesn't sound like a compliment." "It is, though, because the systems were lonely. They kept me safe, but they also kept me isolated." She reached for his hand, threading their fingers together like she'd done so many times now. "You and Ava, you made me want to be disrupted, want to be vulnerable. And that's terrifying because I could lose this. I could lose you. You're not going to lose me. You don't know that. I'm difficult. I'm demanding. I've built my entire identity around being perfect and in control. And I have no idea how to be in a relationship where I can't control the outcome." "Nobody can control the outcome, Victoria. That's what makes it real." She was quiet for a moment, her thumb tracing patterns on the back of his hand. "I've never let anyone this close before. Not since—" She stopped, seeming to debate whether to continue. "Not since what?" "There was someone. In college. Before I started the company." Victoria's voice was soft, almost hesitant. "I thought we were building something. But when I told him about my business plans, about wanting to create something significant, he laughed, said I was too ambitious, that I'd end up alone because no one wants to be with someone who cares more about work than relationships. He was an idiot. Maybe. But he was also the last person I let see the parts of me that weren't about business success. She looked up at Ethan, her eyes vulnerable. Until you. Until I sat in your apartment and played board games with your daughter and realized that maybe I could be both. Successful and human. Powerful and soft. Ethan lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles gently. You're all of those things. You always were. You just needed someone to see it. I needed you to see it, Victoria corrected, and I needed Ava to remind me what matters. As if summoned by her name, Ava's voice called out from her bedroom. Daddy? I had a bad dream. Ethan started to get up, but Victoria squeezed his hand. Can I? You want to check on her? If that's okay. Ethan nodded, and Victoria stood, crossing to Ava's room with the kind of natural ease that suggested she'd done this before. Which she had. Over the past weeks, she'd become as much a part of Ava's bedtime routine as Ethan was. He could hear their voices through the door. Ava's small and scared, Victoria's low and soothing. After a few minutes, Victoria emerged, closing the door softly behind her. She's okay. Just a dream about dinosaurs fighting aliens. Victoria smiled. I told her Barney and Stuart would protect her. You're good at that. At what? Being her bonus mom. Victoria's expression softened. She told you she calls me that? She tells me everything. Last week she asked if you were going to marry me so you could be her real mom instead of just her bonus mom. Victoria's eyes went wide. What did you tell her? I told her that marriage is something grown-ups decide together and she doesn't need to worry about it. Ethan paused. But she brings it up a lot. Just so you know. Does it bother you that she's already thinking that way? No, does it bother you? Victoria sat back down next to him, close enough that their shoulders touched. A few months ago, it would have terrified me. The idea of that level of commitment, of becoming a parent figure to someone else's child. She looked toward Ava's closed door. But now it feels like the most natural thing in the world. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of that admission hanging between them. I'm in love with you, Victoria said suddenly, the words tumbling out like she'd been holding them back too long. I know it's fast and complicated and probably a terrible idea professionally, but I can't keep pretending I'm not. I love you. I love Ava. I love these Thursday nights and the coffee I leave on your desk and the way you look at me like I'm more than just my job title. Ethan's chest felt too full, like his heart had expanded beyond the capacity of his rib cage. I love you too, he said, the words feeling both enormous and insufficient. I've been falling in love with you since that day in your office when you asked if I was okay and actually waited for a real answer. Victoria's eyes were bright with tears, the good kind this time. We're really doing this, aren't we? The impossible thing. Looks like it. People are going to talk. HR is going to have concerns. The board might... Ethan cut her off with a kiss. It was the first time they'd kissed, really kissed, not just the gentle brush on the cheek Victoria had given him weeks ago. Her lips were soft and she tasted like wine, and for a moment the entire world narrowed to just this. Her hands coming up to frame his face, his arms around her waist, the tiny sound she made when he pulled her closer. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Victoria rested her forehead against his. I've wanted to do that for weeks, she whispered. What took you so long? Fear, professionalism, the sense that once I started, I wouldn't want to stop. And now? Now I don't want to stop. She kissed him again, slower this time, deeper. Ethan's hand tangled in her hair, pulling her closer until she was practically in his lap. They stayed like that for a long time, trading kisses and soft words, until Victoria finally pulled back with obvious reluctance. I should go, she said, though she made no move to leave. It's late and we both have work tomorrow. You could stay, Ethan offered, then quickly added, on the couch, or the guest bed. I have a guest bed. It's small and the mattress is terrible, but it exists. Victoria smiled. I should go home. We should take this slow. We're already in love and you're basically co-parenting my kid. I'm not sure we qualify as slow anymore. Fair point. She kissed him once more, quick and sweet. But I still want to do this right, court you properly. Take you on actual dates instead of just sharing wine on your couch. I like sharing wine on my couch. I do too. But I also want to take you to dinner somewhere nice. Maybe see a movie that isn't animated. Have conversations that don't involve dinosaur crime fighting. That sounds good, Ethan admitted. But who's going to watch Ava? My mother would probably love to babysit. She's been not so subtly hinting that she wants more time with her honorary granddaughter. The casual way Victoria said it, honorary granddaughter, made Ethan's throat tight. This wasn't just about him and Victoria anymore. It was about building a family, blending their lives in ways that went beyond romance. Saturday night, Victoria suggested, I'll make reservations somewhere. Somewhere with actual tablecloths and menus that don't have pictures. Fancy. You deserve fancy occasionally. After Victoria left, Ethan stood at his window watching the city lights and trying to process everything that had happened. He'd kissed Victoria Hale. He'd told her he loved her, and she'd said it back. They were planning dates like regular people instead of just stealing moments around the edges of their complicated professional relationship. His phone buzzed. I can still taste you. I'm going to be useless tomorrow thinking about kissing you again. V. Ethan smiled and typed back, Good. I like the idea of being distracting. You're very distracting. In the best possible way. Get some sleep, Victoria. You too. Dream of me. Always. Saturday arrived with cold rain and wind that made Ethan grateful for indoor plans. Patricia picked up Ava at 5 p.m., loaded down with board games and craft supplies, and enough enthusiasm to power a small city. You two have fun, she said, giving Ethan a knowing look. Don't worry about Ava. We're going to make cookies and watch movies and stay up way too late. You're the best, Patricia. I know. Now go get ready. My daughter will be here soon, and she's nervous enough without you answering the door in a t-shirt. Ethan had exactly 45 minutes to shower, shave, and find something to wear that qualified as nice without trying too hard. He settled on dark jeans and a button-down shirt that he'd owned since before Ava was born, but still fit reasonably well. Victoria arrived at exactly 6 p.m., wearing a dress that made Ethan forget how to form coherent sentences. It was simple, dark blue, hitting just above her knees, but on her it looked like something out of a magazine. Hi, she said. And was she blushing? Victoria Hale, Billionaire CEO, was blushing on his doorstep. Hi yourself, you look... Ethan gestured vaguely. I don't have words. You look like words haven't been invented yet. Victoria laughed. That might be the strangest compliment I've ever received. I'm out of practice with dating. So am I. We'll figure it out together. She held out her hand. Ready? Ethan took her hand, grabbed his jacket, and let her lead him to her car. A sleek sedan that probably cost more than he made in a year, but was surprisingly understated. The restaurant she'd chosen was in the downtown area, tucked into a building Ethan had passed 100 times but never entered. Inside, it was exactly as promised. White tablecloths, dim lighting, menus without pictures. The kind of place where the servers all wore black and spoke in quiet, respectful tones. They were seated at a corner table with a view of the rain-soaked city. Victoria ordered wine that the server described with adjectives Ethan didn't fully understand. And for a moment, they just sat there looking at each other like teenagers on a first date. This is strange, Victoria said finally. Good strange or bad strange? Good strange. We've had dinner together dozens of times, but this feels different. That's because we're not sharing leftover pizza while Ava explains dinosaur taxonomy. I like those dinners. Me too, but this is nice too. The conversation flowed easier once they relaxed into it. They talked about work, the Riverside expansion, the Henderson account, office politics that were easier to laugh about outside the office. They talked about Ava, about Patricia, about childhood memories and future dreams. I want to travel more, Victoria said over the main course. I've spent so much time building the company that I never took time to just see things, experience the world outside of business trips and hotel conference rooms. Where would you go? Everywhere. But maybe start with somewhere warm. Italy, maybe. Greece. Somewhere with history and art and food that takes hours to eat properly. That sounds incredible. Come with me, Victoria said, and it didn't sound like a casual suggestion. You and Ava, next summer maybe. We could take 2 weeks and just be tourists. No work emails, no deadlines, just us. Ethan's throat was tight. I'd love that, but I don't know if I can afford. I can afford it. And before you get all proud and male about it, consider it a gift. Consider it me being selfish and wanting to share this experience with the two people who make me happiest. Victoria, please, Ethan, let me do this. Let me give you something good. He looked across the table at this woman who'd somehow become essential to his happiness, who'd seen him at his lowest and decided he was worth investing in, and nodded slowly. Okay, yes, we'd love to go with you. Victoria's smile could have lit up the entire restaurant. After dinner, they walked through the city despite the rain, sharing Victoria's umbrella and talking about nothing important. She showed him the building where she'd started her company, a fifth-floor walk-up that was now a coffee shop. I spent 18 months in that space, she said, looking up at the windows. No furniture except a folding table and a chair I found on the sidewalk. No heat in the winter, but I was building something, and that felt like enough. Do you miss it? The beginning? Sometimes. It was simpler then. Just me and an idea and the belief that I could make it work. She squeezed his hand. But I like now better. Now I have you. They ended up back at Ethan's apartment around 10 p.m., both slightly damp from the rain. Ethan made coffee while Victoria kicked off her heels and curled up on the couch. I don't want this night to end, she admitted when he handed her a mug. Then don't let it stay. Ethan, just to sleep. I mean it. The guest bed is all yours, terrible mattress and all. But I like the idea of waking up knowing you're here. Victoria studied him for a long moment. Okay, yes, I'll stay. They talked for another hour, drinking coffee, and sitting close enough that their knees touched. Around 11, Victoria started yawning despite obvious efforts to hide it. Bedtime, Ethan said gently. I'll get you some clothes to sleep in. He found a t-shirt and sweatpants that would be comically large on her and showed her to the guest room, really just a closet with a twin bed, but clean and functional. If you need anything, I know where to find you, Victoria finished. She stood on her toes and kissed him softly. Thank you. For tonight. For everything. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Best decision I ever made. Ethan went to his own room, leaving both bedroom doors slightly open in case Victoria needed anything. He could hear her moving around, getting ready for bed, and the domesticity of it made his chest ache in the best way. Around 2 a.m., Ethan woke to a soft knock on his door. Ethan? Victoria's voice was quiet. Are you awake? Yeah, you okay? The door opened wider, and Victoria stood silhouetted in the doorway wearing his oversized t-shirt. The mattress really is terrible. Would it be okay if I slept in here? Just sleep, I promise. Ethan pulled back the covers in answer. Victoria crossed the room and climbed into bed beside him, immediately curling into his side like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Ethan wrapped an arm around her, feeling her relax against him. This is better, she murmured against his chest. Much better. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, and when Ethan woke up with early morning light filtering through the windows, Victoria was still there. Her hair was messy, her face soft with sleep, and she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. She stirred when he moved, blinking awake slowly. Morning, she mumbled. Morning. I'm still here. You are. Is that okay? Instead of answering, Ethan kissed her. Morning breath and all, he kissed her until she was smiling against his lips. I'll take that as a yes, Victoria said when they finally pulled apart. They made breakfast together, scrambled eggs and toast because it was all Ethan had, and ate at the kitchen table while Victoria wore his clothes and looked more at home than she had any right to. I could get used to this, she said, stealing a piece of his toast. You better, because I'm not letting you go now. Patricia brought Ava home around noon, and Ava's eyes went wide when she saw Victoria in the kitchen. You're still here! Ava launched herself at Victoria, who caught her easily. Does this mean you're staying forever? Victoria met Ethan's eyes over Ava's head. Would you like that, if I stayed? Yes, then we could be a real family. We're already a real family, sweetheart, Victoria said gently. But yes, I'd like to stay more often. If your dad says that's okay. Daddy always says yes to good things, Ava said with absolute certainty. Patricia lingered in the doorway, watching the three of them with obvious satisfaction. I'll leave you to it, she said. Call me later, Victoria. After Patricia left, the three of them settled into an easy afternoon. They played board games and colored pictures and made lunch together. Victoria helped Ava with a puzzle while Ethan did laundry, and the whole thing felt so normal, so right, that Ethan had to stop folding clothes for a moment just to breathe through the overwhelming sense of gratitude. Later that evening, after Ava was in bed, Victoria pulled Ethan aside. "I've been thinking," she said, her fingers nervous against his. "About us. About how to handle this at work." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Okay. I want to go to HR. Make it official. Disclose the relationship properly so there's no question of impropriety." "That's a good idea. And I want to transfer oversight of your projects to Marcus. You'll still report to me ultimately. Everyone does, but the direct supervision will go to him. That way there's no conflict of interest." "You've thought this through." "I've thought about nothing else for weeks." Victoria squeezed his hands. "I want to do this right, Ethan. I want to protect your career and mine while also being honest about what we are to each other. And what we are is everything," Ethan finished quietly. "You're everything." Victoria's eyes were bright. "So are you, both of you. And I'm not willing to hide that anymore." Monday morning, they went to HR together. The head of human resources, a woman named Sarah who'd been with the company for a decade, listened to their disclosure with professional calm. "I appreciate you coming forward," she said when they finished explaining. "This is exactly the right approach. We'll need to document this, and as you suggested, we'll need to restructure the reporting chain. But I don't see any reason this should be a problem, provided the relationship remains professional during work hours." "It will," Victoria assured her. "And Mr. Cole, you feel comfortable with this arrangement? No pressure or coercion?" "None at all," Ethan said firmly. "This is completely mutual." Sarah nodded, making notes. "All right, I'll draw up the paperwork and send it over for signatures. Congratulations, by the way. It's nice to see Miss Hale happy." Word spread through the office within days, but not in the gossipy, scandalous way Ethan had feared. Instead, people seemed genuinely happy for them. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder and said he'd known it was only a matter of time. Rebecca, Victoria's assistant, actually smiled. "Finally," Rebecca said when Ethan passed her desk, "I've been dropping hints for months." "You have? Who do you think kept scheduling you for meetings in her office? Pure coincidence? Please." The following Thursday, Victoria didn't come over for dinner. Instead, she texted Ethan around noon. "Pack a bag for you and Ava. Enough for the weekend. I'm picking you both up at 5 p.m. "Where are we going?" "It's a surprise, trust me." At 5 p.m. exactly, Victoria pulled up in her car, and Ethan and Ava climbed in with their hastily packed bags. "Where are we going?" Ava asked from the back seat, bouncing with excitement. "You'll see," Victoria said mysteriously. They drove for about 90 minutes, heading north out of the city. The landscape gradually shifted from urban sprawl to rolling hills and scattered trees. Victoria pulled off the highway onto a smaller road, then turned into a long driveway flanked by pine trees. At the end of the driveway sat a cabin. Not rustic. Victoria's version of a cabin clearly came with heating and indoor plumbing, but cozy and private and surrounded by woods. "You have a cabin?" Ethan asked, staring at the structure. "I bought it years ago as an investment. Never actually used it." Victoria parked and turned to look at them both. "I thought maybe we could use it together. Make some memories. Start some traditions." Ava was already unbuckling her seatbelt. "Can I explore?" "Let me unlock the door first." Inside the cabin was exactly what Ethan expected from Victoria. Tasteful, comfortable, stocked with everything they could possibly need. There were 3 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and a living room with a fireplace that Victoria immediately started working on lighting. They spent the weekend there, disconnected from work and obligations. They hiked through the woods with Ava collecting leaves and rocks. They made s'mores in the fireplace and told stories. They played board games and read books and simply existed together without the pressure of the outside world. On Sunday morning, Ethan woke up to find Victoria's side of the bed empty. He found her on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket and watching the sunrise. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, settling beside her with his own blanket. "Didn't want to miss this." Victoria gestured to the sky, painted in shades of pink and gold. "I've owned this place for 5 years and never once watched the sunrise from this porch." "What a waste." "You're watching it now. Because you're here. Because Ava's here." She leaned into his side. Everything's better when you're both here. We could come back, Ethan suggested. Make this a regular thing, once a month maybe. Get away from the city. I'd like that. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher, until Ava's voice called from inside the cabin demanding breakfast. The drive back to the city that afternoon felt different. They weren't returning to separate lives that occasionally intersected. They were returning as a unit, as a family, to a life they were building together. Over the following weeks, things settled into a new normal. Victoria still came for Thursday dinners, but she also stayed over most weekends. Ava's room gained a small shelf of books that Victoria had picked out. The apartment slowly accumulated Victoria's things. A toothbrush in the bathroom, a drawer in Ethan's dresser, a favorite mug in the kitchen cabinet. They went on dates, real dates with restaurants and movies, but they also had quiet nights at home. They attended Ava's school events together, Victoria sitting in tiny kindergarten chairs and clapping enthusiastically at holiday programs. They visited Patricia regularly, and she'd started teaching Ava to bake while Ethan and Victoria did the dishes and talked about their week. One evening in late February, nearly 6 months after that first Thursday dinner, Ethan came home from work to find Victoria and Ava on the living room floor surrounded by markers and poster board. "What's all this?" he asked, setting down his briefcase. "We're making a family tree for school," Ava explained. "I need to bring it tomorrow." Ethan's chest tightened. Family trees had always been complicated for Ava. How do you explain a mother who left, a father doing his best alone? "And look," Ava held up the poster, pointing to the different sections. "That's Grandma Patricia, and that's you, Daddy, and that's me, and that's Victoria." She'd drawn Victoria right next to Ethan, connected with a heart. Ethan looked at Victoria, who had tears in her eyes. "I asked if it was okay," Victoria said quietly. "To be on the family tree. Ava wanted to include me, but I wanted to make sure you were comfortable with—" Ethan cut her off with a kiss. "More than comfortable. She's right. Your family." That night after Ava was asleep, Ethan and Victoria sat on the couch with their wine. "I never thought I'd have this," Victoria said softly. "A family. People who wanted me for more than what I could do for them professionally. You have it now, for as long as you want it. Forever then." She turned to look at him, her expression serious. "I mean that, Ethan. I want forever with you, with Ava. I want to wake up next to you every morning and come home to both of you every night. I want to be there for school events and sick days and all the boring, normal things that make up a life together." Ethan's heart was pounding. Is this? "I'm not proposing, not yet. Not until I have a ring and a plan, and I've asked Ava for permission first, because she should have a say in this." Victoria smiled through her tears. "But I'm telling you my intentions, so you know, so there's no doubt about what I want." "I want that too," Ethan managed. "All of it. Every boring, normal, beautiful moment." 3 months later, on a Thursday evening in late May, Victoria arrived for dinner carrying a small box. "I have something for Ava," she said, setting it on the coffee table. "Can we wait until after dinner to give it to her?" Throughout the meal, Ethan noticed Victoria was nervous. She barely touched her food, kept checking her phone, seemed distracted in a way that was completely unlike her. After they cleared the dishes, Victoria retrieved the box. "Ava, sweetheart, can you come here for a second?" Ava bounced over, curious. Victoria knelt down to her level, the same way she'd done that very first day in the grocery store, and opened the box. Inside was a necklace with a small pendant in the shape of a dinosaur. "This is for you," Victoria said, her voice slightly shaky, "because you love dinosaurs, and because I love you." "It's beautiful." Ava threw her arms around Victoria's neck. "Thank you. There's something else I want to ask you." Victoria pulled back slightly, holding Ava's hands. "I want to ask your daddy a very important question, but I wanted to make sure you were okay with it first. Is that all right?" Ava nodded seriously. "I want to ask your dad if I can marry him, if I can become part of your family officially, not just your bonus mom, but your real mom. Would that be okay with you?" Ava's eyes went wide. "You want to marry my daddy?" "I do, very much, but only if you're comfortable with that. Will you stay forever? Forever and ever." Ava looked at Ethan, then back at Victoria. "Okay, you can ask him, but he's going to say yes. He always says yes to good things." Victoria laughed, wiping at her eyes. Thank you, sweetheart. Then she turned to Ethan, who was standing frozen in the kitchen doorway, his heart doing impossible things in his chest. Victoria stood, reached into her pocket, and pulled out a small velvet box. She didn't kneel. They were past the traditional gestures. She just stood there in his small apartment, holding a ring box, looking more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. Ethan Cole, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You saw me when I didn't think anyone could. You let me be human when I'd forgotten how. You and Ava gave me a family I didn't know I needed. So I'm asking you, in front of our daughter, if you'll let me spend the rest of my life proving how much I love you both. Will you marry me? Ethan crossed the room in 3 strides, pulled Victoria into his arms, and kissed her with everything he had. Yes, he said against her lips. Yes, absolutely, yes. Victoria was crying now, real tears, the kind she used to be afraid of, and Ethan was pretty sure he was crying too. Ava cheered from the living room, already on her phone that didn't actually work, pretending to call everyone she knew. Grandma Patricia, Victoria and Daddy are getting married. We're going to be a real family. Victoria pulled back just enough to open the ring box. The ring inside was simple and perfect, a single diamond that caught the light from the kitchen fixture. I had it sized, she said as Ethan slipped it onto his finger. But if you don't like it, we can… It's perfect. You're perfect. All of this is perfect. They stood in the kitchen holding each other while Ava danced around them singing a made-up song about weddings and families and dinosaurs. Patricia called, Ava must have actually called her somehow, and demanded to be put on speaker so she could congratulate them both properly. Later, much later, after Ava had finally fallen asleep and Patricia had been promised all the wedding planning details, Ethan and Victoria sat on their couch, and he realized he'd started thinking of it as theirs, not just his, with wine and quiet and the weight of their new reality settling over them. I can't believe this is my life, Ethan said, looking at the ring on his finger. 6 months ago I was falling apart, barely holding on, and now you have someone to hold on with, Victoria finished. She leaned her head on his shoulder. We both do. I love you. I love you too, both of you, my ready-made family. They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the city lights through the window, and Ethan thought about how far they'd come. From that first terrible morning when he'd arrived late, and Victoria had looked at him with disappointed precision, to this moment where she was wearing his old t-shirt and planning their wedding and looking more at home in his apartment than probably her own place. The struggles hadn't disappeared entirely. Money was still sometimes tight. Work was still demanding. Single parenthood, well, co-parenting now, still had its challenging moments. But everything was different now. Because when Ethan looked at his life, at his daughter, at his fiancée, at the future stretching out before them, he didn't see the weight of responsibility crushing him. He saw possibility, partnership, love. Victoria had been right that first night she'd stayed over. The best decision she'd ever made was taking a chance on him, but Ethan knew the truth. The best decision he'd ever made was letting her in. Past the walls and the pride and the fear of being seen as weak. He'd let Victoria Hale see him, really see him, all the messy, struggling, imperfect parts. And she'd decided he was worth staying for. And now she was staying forever. What are you thinking about? Victoria asked, her voice sleepy. How lucky I am. We're both lucky. Yeah, we are. Ava called out from her bedroom, something about needing water, and Ethan started to get up. But Victoria squeezed his hand. I'll get it, she said, already standing. You've done enough today. Let me. Ethan watched her go. This brilliant, powerful woman who'd chosen them, who decided that board meetings and billion-dollar deals were less important than playing Candyland and getting water for a 5-year-old in the middle of the night, and felt his heart expand so much it hurt. She came back a few minutes later, reporting that Ava had accepted the water and promptly fallen back asleep while talking about wedding plans. She wants to invite all her dinosaurs, Victoria said, settling back into her spot. I told her we'd see what we could do. You're going to be an amazing mom. I'm already a mom. Maybe not in the traditional sense, but she gestured to Ava's room. That little girl in there? She's mine. Has been since probably the second Thursday she hugged me goodnight. I just didn't have the official title yet. Well, after the wedding, it'll be official. After the wedding, everything will be official. Victoria turned to face him fully. I'm going to adopt her, Ethan, if you'll let me. I want it to be legal and binding and permanent. I want to be her mother in every way that matters. Ethan couldn't speak for a moment, his throat too tight with emotion. She'd love that, he finally managed. We both would. They stayed up late into the night making plans and dreaming about the future. A small wedding, they decided. Just family and close friends. Maybe at Patricia's house or the cabin. Somewhere meaningful rather than elaborate. And then, after the wedding, maybe that trip to Italy they'd talked about. 2 weeks of museums and history and food that took hours to eat properly. Just the three of them, being tourists, being a family. As Ethan finally drifted off to sleep that night, Victoria curled against his side wearing his ring. He thought about how sometimes the best things in life came from the moments you thought would break you. He'd been on the edge of collapse when Victoria Hale first really saw him, when she'd asked if he was okay and waited for a real answer, when she'd chosen to see the person instead of just the pattern. And from that moment of vulnerability, of being truly seen, had come this: love, family, partnership, home. In the morning, Ava would wake up and demand pancakes and talk about her family tree project, and probably ask 1,000 questions about the wedding. Victoria would help make breakfast in her pajamas, getting flour in her hair and laughing at Ava's jokes. Patricia would probably call to start planning. Work would be waiting, with its deadlines and meetings and demands. But through it all, Ethan would carry this: the knowledge that he wasn't alone anymore, that the weight he'd been carrying for so long was now shared, that somewhere along the way, in the small moments and quiet evenings and Thursday night dinners, he'd found exactly what he'd been missing: a person who saw him, a person who stayed, a person who chose him, and Ava, and this messy, imperfect, beautiful life they were building together. And that, Ethan thought, as sleep finally claimed him, was more than enough. It was everything.